There we go. Hello? All right. Yeah.
Green is hot. That's hot.
Are we good? Okay. Thank you in the audience for your patience. Like any presentation, technical difficulties. Song and dance.
Somebody gonna do a stand-up.
We have a.
So you want?
Okay. Yep.
We have contingency plans.
Do we know if Mrs. Hedrick has joined us online? All right. And Mr. Harms, is he online? Not yet. Do we know if he's going to join us late? I know he was ill, so, okay.
He's planning on.
We'll let the record show that everyone, with the exception of Mr. Harms, is present, and we anticipate he will join us if he's feeling better. I'm Mark Rahm. I'm a counselor for the city of Millersburg and your budget chair last year. Thank you for coming tonight. We have a lot to cover. To my left is Mr. Mayor, Mayor Mr. Cowan. Introduce yourself, please.
Yep, I'm Scott Cowan, Mayor, Millersburg resident for the last 25 years.
And we'll continue to the left.
Mark Kickham, City Council. First year. I think this is my third year here in the city. So.
Sherry Dickerman, city recorder. Been here since September.
Matt Street, planner.
Yeah, well, we're going through everyone.
Wasn't sure if that was the plan or not.
Janelle Booth, Assistant City Manager and City Engineer.
Kevin Kreitman, City Manager.
Doug Iverson, I'm the new planning commissioner. I've been in Millersburg for about 5 years now. Been interested in the city politics, so it's fun.
Thank you, Doug.
Tally Richardson, resident here about 5 years, and this is my second year on the budget committee.
John Sullivan, City Councilor. I think I've lived out here about 30 years together.
Wow.
Mike Martin, I lived here about 4 or 5 years. My wife could tell it better than I, somewhere around 5 years.
And Mr. Chair, we have the lovely Miss Lori Hedrick online as well.
Thank you.
She's one of the committee members.
Yes, correct. And has been.
Thank you for the lovely introduction.
He said, thank you for the introduction.
Well, thank you. First order of business, excuse me, is to appoint a new chairperson for this year's budget committee. I'll entertain any nominations for chair.
I nominate Mark Rahm as chair.
Second.
There's a motion and a second on the floor. Do we have any discussion? Anyone else? All in favor, signal by saying aye. Aye. All opposed?
Aye.
Same sign. Hearing none, the motion passes. Thank you. Adoption of the minutes from last Budget Committee meetings, April 26, 2022, and May 5th, 2022. I would point out that there is a correction that needs to be made to the April 26th minutes. Under appoint chairperson, we have Mark Martin as signifying as I, and that should be Mr. Mike Martin.
Chair, forgive the interruption, but also let the record reflect that Mr. Councilmember Dave Harms is online now as well.
Thank you very much. Are you seeing that right here? Under the actual vote itself? Yeah. I did not see any other issues or corrections necessary, so I'll entertain a motion for those as well.
So moved.
Second.
There's a motion and a second for the approval of the consent agenda. All in favor, say aye.
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 Those opposed, same sign. Hearing none, the motion passes. Thank you. Agency donation requests. This is the opportunity for community service agencies to present to the Budget Committee request for support for their future programs. We've been given some information in our packet. Hopefully we've had an opportunity to review that. Do we have members of the community here representing, I hope, all of these entities? Glenda, would you mind stepping up? Tell us about ABC House.
Absolutely. Okay, so ABC House is a children's advocacy center dedicated to providing child abuse assessment and support services for children referred with concerns of abuse or neglect and their families. We launched operations in 1997. Since then, we have served more than 14,000 infants, children, and youth from throughout Lynn and Benton counties. We work as part of a multidisciplinary team, including law enforcement, DHS Child Protective Services, medical and mental health professionals, and youth-serving agencies. We come together to form an efficient and collaborative response to child abuse allegations. We come together in one location. This is to prevent a child from having to go to the police station, to their own doctor, maybe even to the emergency room, and having to retell the worst experience of their lives over and over again with people who are not working together. 90% of the families we serve are low income or underinsured. We rely on community support to ensure that increasing numbers of families are able to receive these essential services. ABC House has been seeing a demand in services over the last 3 years. We believe this is related to factors correlated with the pandemic. This includes increased stress, substance abuse, reduced access to resources now exacerbated by inflation, and disruption of routine. We believe that these are the factors that are involved, and there's no signs of the abuse slowing down. Last year, we served 833 children. Of these 833 children, 38 were from the city of Millersburg. This is up from the year prior. We are not able to confirm beyond that. We have some challenges, as you probably know if you've read our proposal. One being the zip code for Albany and Millersburg are the same, but we are doing our best to work on this. When police and child protective services are concerned a child may have been abused, they are referred to ABC House for an assessment appointment. The assessment appointment has 3 parts: the medical exam, the forensic interview, and family support and referral services. Our family support advocates serve as a main contact throughout the abuse and investigative process, and they stay in contact with families long after the assessment appointment to ensure that their needs are being met. Our medical providers, one of 3, provide the medical exam. Our medical providers are child abuse experts, highly trained in identifying and treating abuse. The exam includes a full head-to-toe exam of the child. Any sign of abuse is documented and may be used as evidence in the investigation. The exam is also an opportunity for children to ask questions about the effects of abuse on their bodies and to receive reassurance from one of our doctors. The interview is conducted by one of our professionals who are highly trained in early childhood communication. They know what questions to ask and how to ask them without leading, interrogating, or re-traumatizing a child to get to accurate information as to what happened. The forensic interview is also recorded to minimize the number of times a child has to retell their experience. As I mentioned earlier, 90% of the families that we serve are low income or underinsured. At ABC House, thanks to generous community support, no child in need is ever turned away due to inability to pay, and families pay nothing out of pocket for these essential services. Our goal is to serve as many children as possible, as promptly as possible. Children impacted by abuse or neglect cannot wait. Their health, welfare, and futures are at stake. Thank you so much for considering our grant request again this year. We greatly appreciate it.
Thank you.
Any questions?
Any questions from the committee? All right.
All right.
Thank you.
Well, thank you
Brenda.
so much.
Thank you.
Representative for the Boys and Girls Club.
Hi, guys. My name's Ryan. I'm the athletic director of the Boys and Girls Club of Albany. I need to be closer. Okay.
It won't bite you.
Okay. Let's lean on in. I'm here. What's that? I'm just going to lean. I think this is good. It's comfortable. I'm here to present our request for another year of support. The support that we ask from you guys is specific to the athletic department and the programs that we run for youth at the Boys and Girls Club of Albany. Specifically, we have 3 categories that the funding in the past that you guys have provided have supported. Number 1 is the Millersburg Park multi-sport camp that we run every summer. This would be the 4th year if that were to continue. We run it right at Millersburg Park. We've worked with the city of Millersburg with marketing and promotions, and it's an event that each week we teach kids a certain sport, and they'll have a day or 2 of skill development, and then on the 2nd or 3rd day, they'll play the game or whatever the event is. And we have prizes and snacks and t-shirts and all that kind of good stuff. So some of the funds help with that funding for that camp. The second category is our winter basketball program. It's the largest program that we run for youth. It's also the program that we have the most Millersburg participants in. This last year, we had 112 youth that are city of Millersburg residents participating in that program. So it's really cool for us to be able to provide that opportunity for so many kids. I mean, we've got 455 kids playing winter basketball. It's a really large program for us. But with the cooperation of the school districts, we can access gyms. So it's the burden of our facility, but it's a community process to make sure all those kids have the opportunity. And then the third category specific to our request is our annual Hoop Jam event, 3-on-3 youth basketball tournament that we run every summer. It's one of our fundraisers, although we look at it more as a community event. Most fundraisers, as you guys know, are like auctions and things of that nature. This is all about kids, getting kids out, participating and playing, and having a great time while they're doing that. And so the support that this grant would provide would go towards equipment, staffing, all of the things that encompass all these programs. So we'd greatly appreciate your consideration on this grant request.
Thank you.
Any questions about any of that?
Any questions?
How many children participate in your summer program for Millersburg?
For the Millersburg camp, it typically averages around 25 to 30 kids. And so if we continue, this would be our 4th year, we'd get into 150, 160 so far.
I want to thank you for the basketball program. I have 2 granddaughters playing this evening, in fact.
Oh, awesome.
But it's a great facility for that, and it's well run. Appreciate it.
Thank you. That's good to hear.
Quick question, a Hoop Jam location of that? And
We'll be at Lynn Benton Community College.
okay, and then do we have a count on how many, are you able to
find out or have those numbers of Millersburg participation?
That one's a little bit more difficult because we don't collect what school they go to in registration. And the same thing as she was mentioning with the zip code stuff, we're not sure exactly if it's Albany or Millersburg residents.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, for sure.
Actually, I do have follow-up. You have it broken down. Would it, if there's a, if we provide the grant funding, would you just break that out accordingly, or how would you look at that?
Yeah, as far as like the three different.
Yeah, did you want us to identify, if we do provide grant funding, do you want us to identify for you?
Gotcha. Yeah, absolutely. If I were to prioritize, I would say the Millersburg Park Camp and the winter basketball programs would be higher on the list than Hoop Jam. But support for all three would be greatly appreciated.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Any other questions?
Thank you very much
you.
for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
City of Albany Parks and Recreation Department.
Thank you so much. Am I loud enough, close enough? I don't really need a mic. I'm pretty loud, but my name is Nicole Markel. I am the Resource Development Coordinator for the City of Albany for Parks and Recreation. What you are receiving is information actually on the 2024 Northwest Art and Air Festival. You are already supporting this year's, but understanding budgets, we're working forward into the 2024 season because it starts in July. So wanted to first thank you for allowing me to be here. We have been wonderful partners with the City of Millersburg and the community for so long, and we appreciate your support and everything that you've done in support of the festival. So Northwest Art and Air brings in between 50 and 65,000 people. Last year we saw over 63,000 over the weekend of the festival, which includes people of all ages and from all over the place. So we're drawing from Corvallis and Portland and Salem and Lebanon and Millersburg and Albany and everywhere. So it's really a full encompassing festival for everyone. We have a wonderful children's zone. We have juried artists that come in. We have over 70 of them. Historically, we're turning people away. We have roughly 30 to 40 hot air balloons. It is unfortunately a dying art, and that number is getting smaller and smaller. So if anyone's interested in becoming a pilot, we can make sure that we can hook you up with the right people because we need more of them. The support that we receive from our partners is what makes this happen. There's this thought out there that taxpayer dollars help put on these events. It is not true. It's all sponsorship money raised by our community partners. So anything that we can do to make sure that we're augmenting that as far as support is what's crucial for us to be able to put these things on. Our headliner this year is Little River Band, and bands are not getting less expensive as they age. They get more expensive and very challenging to find. The proximity of all these wonderful new casinos that are near us has made it even harder. They have very big wallets, and there's all these pieces in there about how someone can't perform within a certain amount of days and a certain amount of miles. So it makes it hard. We are fortunate that we tend to be kind of a pass-through to somewhere else, and we have wonderful booking agents, so it helps. But all of these things cost money to put on, and we love providing them and keeping them as inexpensive or free to the community. This is a free event other than parking, which we basically use those funds to just pay for the people that help direct traffic. And as you all know, when you go to something, it's nice to be able to get out in a timely fashion. So basically the information in front of you is the level that you have been supporting for quite a few years, which is called the gold level. It's at $3,000 sponsorship level. You are not allowed, as I understand it, to receive any of the benefits that go with it. So it's purely just a donation to help support the festival. Although it'd be lovely if there was a creative way that you could maybe like auction them off to the community or something, but not sure if that's legal. And then there's information just generally about the festival and then just some highlights in there. So that's what we use, the support that we receive from sponsorships, and we would really love your continued support. So if there's any questions?
Thank you, Nicole. Anyone?
What is the cost to put on the event?
That's a good question. It's a little bit of a tricky question because we bundle everything between all of our summer concerts. So Summer Sounds, River Rhythms, North and Start and Air, we kind of put all that stuff in together because we use a lot of the same funds and things that we purchase, signage and fencing. We leave it and use it all summer. If I had to guesstimate, I would say probably just under 400,000. But I'm not being very accurate with that because again, like I said, we use a lot of the same equipment that we get for all of them. So it kind of is this big pot of money and it's hard to always pull it apart, but that's a rough estimate. And I earn just for what you, for your knowledge, we bring in about 500,000 in sponsorship dollars. Half of that is cash sponsorship and half of that is in kind, which obviously helps us offset our cost. That goes across all of our programs. So that's for all the concerts, camps, fun in the park, everything. So that's kind of an all-in, generally mark where I hit every year. I haven't lost my job yet, so I guess I'm doing all right.
And I'm assuming there's a charge too to the vendors that are there.
We do have a fee for our food vendors and our artists. It's very small, but it's basically to help us offset power needs and stuff like that. So they don't, and we don't take a percentage of anything. It's just a flat, like, rental fee for the space, for the food, and then for the artists that come in.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Anything else online?
Thank you.
Thanks.
Oregon Cascade West Council of Governments.
Hi, it's nice to see you all tonight. Thank you for letting us come and talk about the Meals on Wheels program. I'm Randy Moore. I'm the Director of the Senior and Disability and Community Services Programs at Oregon Cascades West Council of Governments. That's where we house the Meals on Wheels program for Len, Benton, and Lincoln counties. So we serve all three counties. Some big statistics about all three counties. We have 11 meal sites over the 3-county area, and they serve over 250,000 meals a year, and have a little over 1,600 consumers that benefit from the Meals on Wheels program. The consumers in Millersburg who receive meals from us actually receive meals from our Albany site. And over the last year in 2022, 2 consumers in Millersburg received over 211 meals throughout the year. Meals on Wheels is a program that delivers home-delivered meals to homebound consumers, older adults and people with disabilities who would not be able to get out and actually go to shopping for their own groceries, for example, or might have an inability to prepare their own meal in their home. So what we like to say about Meals on Wheels, though, is that it's more than just a meal. In addition to getting nutritious food delivered to your doorstep, if you're a Meals on Wheels recipient, that check-in with a delivery driver is really the most important thing about the program. It's someone knocking on your door, making sure you're okay. And for many of our consumers, that is the only socialization or check-in that they get from their community at any time. And I will tell you that I have endless amounts of stories of Meals on Wheels volunteers showing up at consumers' homes and finding someone on the floor or in a health crisis. And if it wasn't for that daily check-in, there wouldn't have been someone who would have been there to intervene. And in those situations, we're really lucky that our drivers are volunteer drivers. We have a core of more than 350 drivers over the 3-county region. They will call law enforcement or medical personnel and stay there and make sure that someone comes and checks out the consumer and is safe. Or even if someone's just not home, we have emergency contacts that we reach out to make sure that people are safe. So the nice thing about Meals on Wheels is it is not income-based, so anyone who's an older adult or a person with disability who lives in their home and needs assistance can get assistance. A lot of people think that this is a needs-based program, that you have to be low income to qualify, but that's not the reality. The reality is if you're an older adult and you have a need for someone to come and check in on you and to provide you a meal, that we serve those people. So The other things that Meals on Wheels does that a lot of people don't know about is, for example, one of the things we realized is it's great to take Mary a meal, but if Mary has a dog and that dog isn't able to get dog food, Mary feeds her meal to the dog. So we also have a pet food program, and if you have a person who is receiving Meals on Wheels and they don't, and they have a pet, dog or cat food, maybe some others in the future, but if they do have a pet and that pet is struggling to be fed as well, because once again, Mary can't get to the grocery store, we actually deliver, we have partnerships with our local humane societies, and we have our volunteers deliver cat or dog food out to the consumers. So that's a nice touch as well. Many of our consumers, we do a lot of different appreciation events. We make sure that they get letters against isolation. So we have groups that send them fan mail and pen pals. We have every year the Girl Scouts, if they have excess cookies, they give us their cookies and we deliver those to the Meals on Wheels consumers. So we really just try to provide a real well-rounded ability for people to feel appreciated in the community, even if they're at home and unable to get out into the community. So I think most of the information is in our application. Oh, let me tell you, the other thing is our all-in cost for a meal right now is about $14. And that includes the food, that includes staff time, that includes our facilities. And so our mileage reimbursement for our volunteer force. So, you can do the math of those 211 people or 211 meals in Millersburg. That actually cost us about $1,500 to produce over the last year, and we're asking for $1,000 to help offset some of that cost.
Thank you.
Yeah, happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, you have 200, two residents in Millersburg that are, sounds like they're just homebound all the time. Do you have a service for temporary situation, like someone coming out of surgery and they can't get out? And
Definitely. Quite often we work with people who just, have a short-term health solution. The other thing to remember about my programs, and I just have to put a little plug in, is we have all sorts of different programs that can support people with help with bathing, dressing, other care needs, transportation. So there are a lot of programs. The nice thing about Meals on Wheels being tied to senior and disability services is that we can put that whole safety net in place, but we constantly get referrals for people who, I have a short 5-month issue that I need some support with, and we can definitely start someone for short-term services like that.
How does a resident find you?
Well, that is a very good question. I think, and something that we need to do more work on, actually Council of Governments' strategic goals over this next year is to get more people be more aware of who we are and what we do in the community. So for the first time ever, we're putting, just yesterday, I approved the final draft of advertisements at the beginning of movie theater movies, and we actually are putting some information on radio ads right now too, because we realize that people don't necessarily know who we are or how to find us. So one of these days, I am going to bring some brochures here for you all for our Aging and Disability Resource Connection, which is a call center that can provide information about our programs, as well as if you have an aging person or a person with disability in your family, information about any resource in the 3-county area that might be able to support.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes, sir.
I would just point out that on our website, under other services, if you click on senior disability services, it directs them to COG, and then they can get there and list all of the services that they provide.
Fantastic. Glad to see we're doing that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Lynn County Fair. Okay. That's the Hello Valued sponsor. Give everyone a moment to read that if they haven't already. Not that we we could answer any questions, but do we have any questions? All right, I'll move on. Timber Ridge parent teacher. Hello, Abby.
Hello, my name is Abby Johnson, and I am the president, sorry, my ring's hitting. I'm the president of the Timber Ridge PTC. So we are the parent-teacher committee of Timber Ridge School over here in, I guess, Albany. I want to say Knoxview, but I don't think it's called that anymore. And we have probably around 300 kids from the Millersburg area that go to Meadow and Timber Ridge. And that's just a guesstimate because they can't give me a specific number because I have to call the bus barn and the bus barn doesn't know. So we are putting on events to bring our families back into schools and to help teachers with activities like field trips and whatnot. And we're currently getting ready to put on a field day for the kids at the school. This is going to be the first field day they've had in 5 years probably. So the money that you gave us this last year went towards our carnival to help us raise some funds because we were starting off at barely anything. And we had a huge turnout, which was amazing and brought in tons of families from both schools and from other schools actually in our community, which was amazing. So this year, or this, the money that you would be giving us would go towards next year's carnival and help us to put on maybe a better event. So I'm not quite as fancy, sorry.
Remind, what did we provide this recently to you? How much was that?
1,000.
1,000, okay.
And you parlayed that into, you don't have to answer that.
We put it into our carnival. It all went into our carnival.
It sounds like it was really,
really successful.
It was extremely successful. It was more successful than I anticipated. So we actually had a line all the way out our door.
Congratulations.
So, yeah. And it's great because we get, we have combined families at both of our schools, and we are the only school that puts on a carnival. Meadow Ridge doesn't. So all the families from there come to ours because they're both invited. So we bring in both.
Very good. Any other questions? Thank you, Abby.
Thank you.
I'll remind the committee up on your, yes, sir.
I had a question that looks like it might fall to the Art and Air Festival person because the other person is not here. I see references in here to VIPs.
Yes.
Who are the VIPs? I mean, and why are there VIPs at a county fair?
Yeah. So, okay, so this is, are you talking specifically for Northwest Art and Air Festival?
I'm just
And
wondering.
yeah, I would say
I don't know
the fair
anything
probably
about
does the same thing. So we treat our partners and sponsors, we can call them our VIPs. So there's benefits that are received, which my understanding is you guys can't take them. But there are concert seating areas and hot air balloon rides and different things like that. And so we consider those benefits and spaces our VIP areas.
Like Bill.
Exactly. Yes.
Thank you. Could you go back to the previous slide? That slide, thank you. I just wanted to remind the committee of the criteria that this committee and the council have laid out for such requests as we entertain this evening. When we review these through the course of the rest of the budget committee or the budget hearing tonight, keep that in mind if you'd like to.
And Chair, if I could just mention, so you have before you on this slide, the 23-24 requests and are proposed based on the 22-23 budget.
Okay.
The primary purpose of this is if that you want to ask someone, but the intent is for the main discussion, and if anyone wants to provide feedback now, they can, but the main discussion regarding the funding will actually occur when we get into the budget itself.
Thank you. Any comments or questions regarding that? The audience is welcome to stay and listen to the rest of this if you'd like. We won't be making a decision exactly tonight, but we will be making that over the next couple of months, and you'll be hearing from us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming and sharing.
Next item of business, overview of the strategic plan.
Janelle will be covering that with you. Oh, sorry, nope, I will be covering that, sorry. I stepped ahead. I went to the public improvements plans. All right, strategic plan overview. All right, so just as a reminder, our mission statement, partnering with business and industry to maintain a quality small town atmosphere. We'll talk a little bit about that tonight and the importance of our business and industry here with the services that we have during the budget message. We'll talk a bit more about that. Our vision of community value and our strong industrial foundation and economic development, such as supports our tax base, providing funding for excellent service for a safe and healthy community and a small town atmosphere. So these are our values, and if this is available. If anyone wants to look at this, it's available online. We're not going to hit all of it tonight, but I want to just hit two things that I think come into play when we're looking at the budget. So the first is community trust with our values, and then our continued fiscal responsibility. So developing trust is one of our highest priorities, and centering on our ability to build and uphold our reputation of being open, honest, ethical, and transparent. One of the things I just want to point out is I think a lot of times we've heard a lot, especially here just recently, about people thinking that we're not necessarily sharing things. And I would just state that everything that we do as a city is online. And I think you would be surprised if you looked at what we have in our packets for council and planning packets and actually read what's taking place. It is very, very detailed in our staff reports and stuff. I think you'd be surprised that most cities our size, you don't find those. In fact, some larger organizations in this area have very little if you try to look and see what's in their agenda packets as far as what they're going to be talking about. So I just wanted to point that out. We do not try to hide things. I think most of you that probably have attended council meetings that are not counselors or planning commission meetings can probably see that. So, but if anyone ever has any questions, and our minutes are there and the thing. So I would just encourage that to use that. There's a lot of information on our website, and we're always looking for ways to improve as well. All of our meetings are broadcast, they're live online as well, so if they're not able to attend. So I just wanted to point that out. Continued fiscal responsibility as stewards of public resources. We recognize responsibility to utilize those resources efficiently, operating with the goal of delivering value while sustaining long-term success. And I'll highlight this again. One of the things that's really important that I think that most people do not realize, we're limited to 3% growth. And with just our tax base alone. So when we don't have new growth, new value coming in, that can put a strain. It can limit what things that we can do. But we're blessed because we have such a large industrial base here. And hopefully we'll continue to see that grow. Right, next slide. Our strategic priorities. One is community governance. We're governed in a way that supports the needs of our growing residential base, business, and industry. Safety, provide effective emergency services to our community. Development of residential, commercial, industrial properties as a planned and managed process. I will say that having Matt on now as a full-time planner assists us greatly in that. Is a huge benefit. Again, you don't find many cities our size with a full-time community development director. But because of the amount of industry that we have, it's really a needed. And with the amount of residential growth we've experienced the last 4 years has been invaluable and will continue to be. Public infrastructure, city infrastructure systems designed, constructed to maintain and meet our current and future needs. Again, we wouldn't have the infrastructure today that we have here if it weren't for our industrial base. It just would not exist. And I would just point out Tangent, city not far from us. They have a large area, but they have no water. So they're limited. They have no water system. They do not have a tax base. And they have a very limited sewer system. So there really isn't much, it's really hard for them to grow. So those are very expensive services to be able to provide. We were very fortunate because when our city was formed, we had a large industrial base that provided that allowed us to extend that to get to where we are today with our residential. Recreation, community supports recreation, social activities for all ages, and then environmental stewardship, promotes sustainability through efficient management of our natural resources. And then we're going to move into our capital improvements program with Janelle.
So we'll do a really brief overview on what the CIP is. But if there's anybody with questions, I think most of you have heard this before or aware of it. And then we'll walk through the projects that we have proposed in the 5-year CIP, but focusing on the projects in the first year, which are in the budget. So, capital improvement program, it's a planning document that identifies capital projects in the next 5-year horizon. We have 6 sections: parks, public facilities, transportation, stormwater, wastewater, and water. That would be drinking water in that case. Funding can come from a variety of sources, including system development charges, and you'll see that sprinkled in throughout the budget as well. If you have any questions about how those work, we can pause, but again, I think most of you have heard that before. They're restricted to only be able to be used for capital, and only certain projects can have certain parts of SDC funds used for them, and that's all set in state statute, how we have to manage those funds. So this is just an overview, and this is all in the CIP plan that's in front of you. It's many pages, so these are just the summaries for each area. But overall, this is what we have programmed for expenditures for the next 5 years in parks. And we're going to parks, public facilities, transportation, stormwater, wastewater, and water. And we're really going to focus on the 23-24 projects right now. But if you have questions on any others, we'll touch on them a little more briefly.
Question on the dollars here. Are these inflated or are they current year dollars?
These are current year dollars, and every year we inflate them. So there's a separate tracking spreadsheet that does the math for us, and then they get input into this. Okay, so this is parks, first of all. So this year we have the new neighborhood park planning and development project. So this is mostly funded by a grant, which you'd see in the CIP. Each project has its own page, and it breaks down the funding for each of those projects and where it comes from. So $32,000 is coming from a grant that has already been received, but it's a reimbursement grant, and Matt's actually managing that project for us. And then we have an $8,000 match, which can be provided by in-kind services. Are there any questions on that project? Just jump in if you have questions on specific projects.
Where's the revenue at?
This is in the northwest part of Millersburg.
No, but I mean, where's the revenue piece? You said it's coming in. Which lines are the?
So in the CIP, when you go to the parks section.
So not this.
It's the next page in front of that.
Is that what you were looking for? Okay. And in the budget, those things are all listed. Under parks, there'll be a revenue for grant, and it'll be $32,000.
Right.
The linear park and multi-use path south of Concert Road. So you're going to hear this project multiple times because it has elements of streets, parks, and water in it. And that's our Transition Parkway project. I know most of you heard a lot about over the last few months. So the parks portion of that, there are pieces of that are eligible for funding through our park SDCs. So some of those are being accounted for in our parks fund. The remainder of the parks, though, we don't have enough SDCs to cover that whole project. Some of that money will also come from revenues that you'll see later in the budget for anticipated sale of property. Because as we've discussed below, this project isn't going to go forward if things aren't happening on that property. The city park restrooms floor and wall coating, that's a project that has been planned for a couple of years now, and we were going to move forward with it and then realized we had some roofs to replace first because we had some leaking and we didn't want to invest in the interior until we fixed the roof. So the roof project is done now. I don't know if you've noticed that at the park. the shelter and the south restroom building have new roofs. And so now we're planning to move forward with the floor and wall coatings. And then the Acorn Park frontage improvements. This is a project that staff have added to the list. It's actually something our maintenance supervisor has been talking to me about for a little while. Like, hey, that leaning bollard and that cable, we should do something about that. The dog pot station needs moved, and we decided to wrap it all up into one project. The reason why it's $40,000 in here is we're anticipating a fair amount of sidewalk work, but we would really like that project to go through our Parks Commission to get their input on it. So this is a budgetary number. I don't know that the project will end up being this much, but we're anticipating needing to redo some ramps and potentially extend the sidewalk across the front because it doesn't extend across that frontage right now. Are there any questions on those? Okay. The future projects here, these, the south ball field, infield mix, the tennis court resurfacing, those are projects that were in our Parks Master Plan, and they've just been moving up in the timeframe. So we've seen those for a couple of years now. The tennis court surface is going to need redone pretty soon, so we don't want to put that off too much longer. And then the infield mix is just adding to what has been there in the past. Every so many years, we need to refresh that. We'll evaluate that before we actually do the work and see what the surface is actually.
Any additional
like.
drainage?
This is for the south field, which does have drainage. The drainage on the north field is actually the first project under plan year 25-26. North ball field renovation, that would include drainage work.
And how did we prioritize these, the one over the other?
Based on how they were laid out in the Parks Master Plan originally that was adopted. This is all, these can be changed. So if there's direction to move these projects around, this is just a 5-year plan at this point. They become really solid the year we start moving forward with them.
Does the north field actually get used? I know the south field gets used a lot. I've just never
It
seen
would get
one
used
of
more if it wasn't holding water.
It's very difficult to prepare it. And I don't know if you've noticed that it's the outfield, just outside the dirt area, is the last thing to get mowed in the park because it's a swamp. So we have many organizations wanting to use our ball fields. And if it was in better shape, it would be getting a lot of use, just like the south one.
Have any of those organizations offered to offset some of those costs because they're using the field, they're putting wear and tear on the fields? Have they offered to offset some of those costs for those improvements?
Yes, is the short answer. They've offered to partner with us and do certain things. Some turf has been proposed in the south field, different things like that. And so those things are definitely still on the table as possibilities. No one has offered to come in and pay to put in all the drainage that we need, and that's the biggest thing we need. But they have helped us with some fencing. Last year, they funded the fence redo on the south ball field.
JBO uses those fields, correct?
Yeah, and that was JBO who did.
Good.
And
I was just saying, if I could, just to kind of piggyback off what she was saying, it might also be good to put some kind of like small storage shed out there somewhere. Because I know everywhere that I've coached in the past, it was the coach's responsibility after the game to rake the field, to just basically put the field back to the way it was before the game or practice. And I know unless they bring it themselves, there's no way to do that.
no, they actually do. In our south storage building, they have a key to
Okay,
that.
so
And
there is a
they
storage
use
there,
that
okay.
for that.
There's a storage, they have a
Okay.
storage area.
But that's a very good point. They do those activities. Our crews prep the fields at the beginning of the season when they need additional work. But throughout the season, the teams are doing that.
Okay.
This might not be the right spot, but I brought it up many years in a row, so I'll bring it up again, is tennis versus pickleball. It's a much easier sport. I think you would see a lot more activity in our community. I know this probably could go to the Parks Commission, but I'd like to raise the question here. I continue to see tennis, and I'd like to see it pickleball. And I think you can do pickleball and tennis together. It's multi-use, it'd be better use. That's where I stand on it, and I think you'll see a lot more people use it for pickleball.
I agree.
I would
And
have
we
to
brought
agree.
it up at the Parks Commission. the pushback was that the residents behind that area, pickleball could be a louder sport because of the way of the racket that they use, the ball they use, there's more noise involved. I think pickleball it would be a good direction. I think it'd be great to have multi-use, to have that ability to have, different, have pickleball available. But it seems as though there has been some pushback from the neighbors.
And I would say in that discussion that we had, the neighbors haven't necessarily specifically pushed back because they don't necessarily know that's being considered. That has been an issue in parks that have done this in the past, is why we were raising it, that no one thought about the noise and then they did this and then the neighbors who had been there for a long time, wait a minute, now all of a sudden it's very noisy.
Was that a function of the actual game or the fact that people are now using the court?
It's the sound of the ball hitting the ball. But it is something the Parks Commission should discuss, and I know it's on the list to be discussed for the new park in the Northwest area.
And I actually do agree. It seems like pickleball is just,
It's
getting
up
very
and coming,
popular.
it really is.
Yeah.
And I think having it available at both parks would be nice.
I will say though, when we had discussions during when the Parks Master Plan was being done, the number of people that came out that stated when it was talked about changing that, the number that said they play tennis, and I do know that we do see, I would say I see more people playing tennis here than probably any other courts that I've ever seen. So there is quite a bit when we're out there during nice weather. A lot of people out there are playing tennis on it.
So maybe multi-purpose.
Yeah.
Possibly. The planning project for the park is going to have public outreach. That's one of the main components of what's budgeted this year with the consultant. So I think that is going to be part of the public outreach, and see what the thoughts are on pickleball. And yes, that's specific to that park, but
Right.
pickleball in general.
There might be some noise control measures that could be taken too. I'm not sure what, but
Is it really
Maybe.
that much louder than basketball? Or,
That's true.
Right.
I mean, basketball court's right there too.
Yeah.
I totally would sympathize with people
Yeah.
living right next door, but
Right.
when they move there, they know there's a park
park.
there.
There's a
So there's a
There's
park
gonna be noise,
and
yeah.
activities take place in a park. But I don't discredit, their
And I would just be
concerns, but-
leery of, most likely if we did something for noise control, it's gonna be putting hedges back in. We
Right.
took a lot of it down because we're having some issues. There were things that were taking place because it was an enclosed area on the basketball court. So we ended up having to open that up because of those issues.
Gotcha.
We
Yeah,
took down the-
pickleball is a very polarizing issue. It's like bringing up chickens in the city council. That is a huge issue. It stops everything in the city while everybody comes out.
What's wrong with
Pickleball is very similar. You have the pro camp and you have the anti-camp, and
Wow, did not know that. Well, it hasn't landed yet at our council meetings. as
Chickens
that
did.
way, but
Yeah.
Chickens do, but yeah,
Stay tuned.
stay tuned.
I think I don't think it's a matter of if, it's a matter of when we have.
Right.
pickleball
Yeah.
courts.
I just wanted to bring it up. So, yeah.
I'm glad you did.
And I'm glad that the Parks has looked at that. Thank you.
And not to belabor it, but I would encourage the Parks Commission to reconsider the north versus south, which ballpark they address. Just bring that back to us.
And the Parks Commission hasn't thoroughly gone through this list of
Okay.
projects. This is, when they got restarted again, we said, we want to go through this, but timing wise with their meetings and budget, we said next year, before we get to the CIP next year, we want to go through these and prioritize things.
There are challenges though with doing drainage there. There's
Yeah.
not an easy way because of the elevations and what we have to do to drain it. So it's not going to be an easy, it's going to be an expensive fix. And that's one of the reasons why it's put out a ways with trying to get the other park and other things. Now, as we see some of the industrial that could come, we'll have a lot more resources and, we could do all of this stuff. But one of those projects was just eliminated. So, maybe a little bit slower and before we see that we can do those things.
And that is a challenge. The reason why, I shouldn't say the reason why, one reason why we don't have good drainage in that part of the park is because it's going to be really challenging to get anywhere by gravity.
Yeah.
That water with the distance it needs to go. It'll probably be a flat system, honestly, not with any slope. So that as the water, it'll drain the surface, but we just don't have much
Not enough
elevation
pitch
to work
like
with.
into the towards the parking lot that way or something like that?
Or back towards the.
The parking lot doesn't have any drainage in it
No drainage in there.
until, well, we do have some drainage in there, but it's
probably not
not
the
where
right-
it needs to be.
Anyways, this is not the place.
Yeah.
Getting into the weeds
Yeah.
a little bit, but yeah.
Are there any other questions on the parks projects? Ready to move on to,
Thank you.
let the most fun ones, right?
Yeah.
All right, public facilities. So this was where our fire station project was in the last few years, and that's done now. So we have just 3 projects here that we'd like to do this coming year. City Hall Dropbox area, ADA ramps and sidewalks. So we've had a project kind of on our list for a while to redo the ADA ramp up front here. No one has come to us with, saying you need to fix this, but standards have changed and that is quite old. So at some point it needs to be upgraded. What's driving the project right now is the Dropbox area would be where the mailbox is now. We have been approached by the county to install a permanent ballot drop box, which would be great. We've been asking for this because the temporary one inside causes people get confused. They're not sure where it is. It also requires staff to stay late on election nights, which staff have been happy to do, but a permanent drop box outside would be a better solution for our residents. And in doing that, we'll need to do some reconfiguration. They like a certain distance between mailbox and drop box because people get them confused and put their ballot in the mailbox when they want it. So, yes.
Have you contacted the elections division?
The
I do
elections
believe-
divisions contacted us and we're working with them.
Did I say I thought they had some funding available for that.
They will provide the box. They
won't put it in.
Lynn County they'll put in the box, but they won't do the groundwork that needs to be done to.
The ramp realignment
Yeah.
and all that.
Yeah, so this is county elections. And we had some discussions because initially they're like, well, if we're just pouring a pad, we can come pour the pad and put it in. We're like, we can't, it doesn't work with the configuration we have. And the other thing is our mailbox doesn't work as a drive up because of the way it's situated. So the plan is to bump that out and basically have a curved island that takes up those, not parking stalls, but the striped area basically, and shift those out so people can actually use them as a drive up and just reconfigure that area. And that will also give us an opportunity to build in an ADA ramp or ramps on either side that meet the current standards without having to redo a bunch of concrete up here in front of the building, which is what we were looking at before. So that's what that project is about.
That'd be great.
And it has to be done, it doesn't have to be done, but the goal is to have it done before next October. So they can install the box before the November election. The City Hall generator project, this has been on our list for a while as well. This would be installing a generator that we already own that came from one of our sewer lift stations as an emergency backup for a portion of this building. So although we own the generator and that's a big part of the cost, the work to install it, wire it, have an enclosure, a fuel tank, those sorts of things is what's driving the cost on that. And then the third item is an interior office remodel. So staffing has changed over some time. Our interior space is not the most efficient use of space that we have. So we would like to do some reconfiguring. Sheena's worked with King Office to do some layouts on that, and we'd like to do that over the next year. And it will actually end up creating a space that could be used for another desk station in the future as well.
So do you already have modular furniture in there that could be reconfigured, or do you have to just go from nothing?
No, that's part of
Because-
the problem. What we
Yeah.
have now was built, so it's not the best from an ergonomic standpoint. So it's coming in and allow us to do things we need to address from ergonomics, as well as allow us the ability to reposition and make better use of the area.
I was just wondering, based on the cost, it's like, that's like a whole new office. And if you already had modular, it would just be moving things around and buying a few extra components.
Unfortunately, everything was built in.
Okay.
And we looked to see if we could even keep maybe just the skirting around it. And the dimensions were such that we couldn't do it. So when you look at it for three spaces, it's actually pretty.
And when did this City Hall get built?
This portion?
Yeah.
This portion of the building was built in So, but I'm not, a portion of it that's out there was in 84, the rest of it was done in 2009.
What? Yeah, I think you're right.
2001.
So
The
20
part we're
years.
configuring though was the 84.
Yeah.
I think they did some
It's both,
reconfiguring.
it's both.
Okay.
It's a portion of both.
And that's for the front office space, the reception area?
Yeah.
Ready for the next? Okay. Transportation.
Okay, can I ask a question?
Uh-huh.
And you're probably gonna be mad, but I don't remember you covering the unfunded projects on the parks.
Oh, you're right, I didn't.
But I'm curious, with such a large ending balance that continues to grow, why don't we stick any of these unfunded projects in there? I mean, you're projecting it to grow to 113 at the end of this year.
The
and
end.
to 182 next year, so why are we not doing some of the unfunded stuff?
So I think what you're looking at, though, those are SDCs. And, you know, so they're restricted on what we can do, but part of it is looking at trying to get the park done, the new park as well. So it's a matter of looking at it, but, so those numbers, and that was pulled down significantly. So that's part of the issue of why those unfunded are not out there. And the unfunded one, at the time that the study was done, the master plan, those were not seen as a high priority at that point. For this. So that's part of it. So there's a number of things that come into play with it.
And I
Sorry
think,
to go back, it was just something I was trying to read through. So.
yeah, and I think that's part of what the Parks Commission should look at, right? This is the whole list of projects. At the time, when the Parks Master Plan was done, the first 5 years of projects were the prioritized projects based on bang for the buck, for one thing, like some of the smaller things that could be done. And some of the unfunded, like you'll see in all of the areas, some of the unfunded projects are the big ones, right? You know, we don't have however much sitting around, you know, to do this. Street projects will be good examples, this, you know, really large project, but they're still identified as a project that we need to do at some point, or we would like to do at some point. And so that we want to keep those on a list and keep them identified and keep tracking their costs as they escalate over time. But it doesn't mean we have to do them or have to move them to the funded or constrained list at any specific time. The other thing those unfunded projects are included in when they're in a master plan is part of our SDC development. So when we're talking about system development charges and how much we should be looking at to charge for new development to cover the costs of the anticipated project to support the growth of the city, even if we don't anticipate having the funds to do them in the 5-year period, they still count toward what we collect in SDCs. So it's important to maintain those lists.
Okay. It still just bothers me growing from 21,000 in 4 years going to 182. That's a huge amount of growth hanging on the cash.
So and the park SDC numbers?
Yes.
So I would say the park SDC number was much higher before we had a lot more funds before we acquired that north property. So for SDCs, we typically we got to build those back up before we get an amount that's usable. So those can only be used for new capital, expanding, growth-related projects. So projects that expand the capacity of the system. We can't use them for maintenance. We can't use them for repair or anything like that. So we can't use them to resurface the tennis court. I have not thought about whether we could use them to convert to pickleball, but those sorts of things.
You could, it's new.
I don't know about that, but if we were going to add a new shelter in a park,
Yeah.
that expands capacity, so they could be used for that.
I like it, because it's there. I didn't see that there. so.
And then the other thing we also have to take into consideration is as we add new things, it's more in the way of a maintenance, ongoing maintenance. So we have to balance that and the time and stuff of our staff. So there's a number of things that come into play.
So the parks SDC can't be used for anything in the parks. It's specific.
Specific to capital growth-related projects, yeah.
I wish it could be used, wish it could be used differently.
Capacity.
Yeah, I mean, that
Yeah.
helps me understand.
Yeah.
It just
Really
seems so-
restricted.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
that
We
explains
can't,
the
but
huge growth.
as counselor, we can use it for added capacity in the park. And it's just a matter of balancing that. You know, we want to try to get funds about so we can get something developed for that north park. So,
Okay. Thank you. I'm sorry to make you go backwards.
No,
I'm just curious, how do our SDCs compare to Albany's SDCs?
you mean for a total amount that we
Yeah.
charge?
Right.
I don't know that number right now. I know when we adopted the SDCs a few years ago, we went through the process. Some of you were here and a part of that with a consultant and evaluated them. We were probably a little lower than Albany's at the time when we finished that process. But one thing we've done that I don't believe Albany has done is when we adopted those, we adopted automatic escalation based on construction cost indexes to try to keep those numbers consistent with the cost of capital construction, which is what they're for. And so ours have gone up every year. And with the rate of the cost indexes going up lately, they've gone up a lot. This was actually discussed at council meeting last night, and it's something that council could consider, but right now I would guess we are higher than Albany, but I don't know their number off the top of my head. For a single family home, our total SDC charges among all the areas is about $20,000. Any other questions before I jump into the transportation project? All right. So the first project on this list is the Zulke Extension West. It's called Phase 1. The money that you're seeing in here is money that the city collected from a developer previously and has been holding that would go toward that construction. We're showing it now because there's a potential development that might build that project and the city would need to put those funds toward it based on the resolution that was adopted at the time when those funds came in. So we're showing it as possibly being spent this year. If that doesn't happen, that won't get spent this year. Those will just continue to be held, but we need to budget it just in case. That is not the cost of the project. That's just the amount that we're holding. Transition Parkway is the big one. Does anybody want me to describe the project, or is everyone pretty familiar with it?
Everyone's familiar with the Transition Parkway? All right.
Has it been approved to move forward?
It's in design right now. So the amount you're seeing here is what we would expect to expend based on the project estimates through for the next fiscal year that will take us through design, bidding, and the beginning of construction, assuming everything continues on the path it's on. And just for streets. So this is not the overall project cost that you're seeing in 23-24, but if you look in the project sheet in the CIP for this, it'll have the total cost over the 2 years it's budgeted. That could change, that could shift based on construction schedules and things happening. That money could shift between years, but that's what we're anticipating right now for the street portion of that project.
But for the full project, 4.5 million.
That's for the street portion of the project, not the water main and not the park.
You say that takes us up to the phase of, I know it's listed out in different phases, but up to building, construction?
The total project cost you're seeing there is through construction and done.
Yeah.
But not
I'm
what's
just talking about
budgeted
this.
for.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that one. I'm just talking
This
about this,
figure here.
this one, this 971, that takes us to,
971 would take us through what we anticipate in this fiscal year. This
Yeah.
coming one that we're budgeting. So that would be design, bidding would be scheduled for next, we have planned to advertise in January of next year, bidding in the winter, February, March, award, and getting started on construction. Because of the way we pay construction contracts, we'd probably only pay a little bit of the construction in this coming fiscal year, and the majority of it would be in the next year because they've got to mobilize and they've got to do all their upfront work, and then we start getting billed based on work that's completed. So that's more finishing design, getting through the bidding process, and some of that upfront, and did probably shift more dollars into this fiscal year than we might expect because just in case,
Right.
it goes faster than we think.
What's our mobilization target date?
April.
Okay.
It'll depend on how quickly contracting goes and what the contractor does. All right. Another big project we have is the bridge replacement, Waverly Drive at Cox Creek. It's a big project. It's not a big cost for us because we have a grant that is going to pay for most of it. That's the bridge that goes into Talking Water Gardens, if anyone's not familiar with it. We have jurisdiction over the bridge, even though we have no right of way on the south side, because that's City of Albany, and on the north side is Oregon Parks and Rec because that's the parking lot for Simpson Park, but we own the bridge. And the county has been very supportive. They used to own the bridge before us in helping us apply for grants, and then they have agreed to deliver the project. So it's under the bridge funding program through ODOT for grants for these. It's a very routine thing for the county. They do many of their own every year or every time they get grant funding with every cycle. So we're anticipating maybe $50,000 spent this year. Our part is 10.27% of the total anticipated project cost that was part of the grant application. So we're responsible for that. The total will be around, I want to say 300 and some thousand is what we anticipate our part will be. To look at that sheet.
Yeah, yep, 362
Okay, thank you.
at the end.
362 by the end. And again, the split of that money between fiscal years is going to depend on how the project progresses, things with ODOT. Don't get started real quickly. So probably what will happen this year is some survey, some real preliminary design. And this was from talking with the county who'll be managing the project the other day. And then things will get going faster in the subsequent years. Any
Good
questions
job
that
on
one?
the grant and receiving that. I mean, that's $362,000 bridge. That's
$3 million.
$3 million
$3.5
and something.
million
It's
bridge.
just-
Yeah. And the county's pretty efficient with these projects, honestly. So we're fortunate they're willing to deliver it for us.
Yeah.
And the last round of the infrastructure funding from the federal government is what got us this one. They came back and said, we'll fund some more bridges, and we got in on that round.
Nice.
Street lighting, Woods Road, that actually is a carryover from this fiscal year. We had it budgeted and planned this year, but it didn't happen. So we're just moving it to next year. And this would just be adding street lighting to existing poles. Pacific Power does it, so we pay them, contract with them and pay them the bill for doing it. And the Woods Road Shared Use Path North, we've been talking about this off and on in meetings, but we have that project ongoing. We've been doing surveying, wetlands work. We're going to need to do right-of-way acquisition in order to get that moving along, but we are trying to keep that one going forward. But it's going to be spread out over a couple of years just because that process is long, especially knowing with our wetlands that we're going to need to deal with.
I have a question for you. So with the street lighting, is there a reason, and I ask this because I've had a lot of people actually make comments to me about it. It seems like the streets here are very dark. Is there a reason? Is it just the lights we have? Did we go with fewer? I'm just curious.
The reason why they are the way they are today is, we have standards in our engineering standards for minimum foot candles, and that translates to spacing of fixtures and all of that. I think where we have the newer LED fixtures, we have things a little brighter, but some of the older areas probably aren't as bright. So some have been switched out to LEDs, and we could, we can have more switched out. We just need to budget for that. It's interesting you bring that up because we have, with our new project, we've been having a lot of lighting discussions and what's the appropriate level of lighting. The level of lighting you want to see is more of a policy decision than an engineering decision, because some communities want their skies darker. Some people don't want as much lighting. Some might want more to feel, maybe they feel safer with more lighting. Our standards are the same as Albany's because they always were, before, but that can be changed. Our consultant from Jacobs Engineering just purchased a light meter so we could do some testing on getting readings on what we actually have out here on Transition Parkway and get a sense for, okay, our code says this, our standards say this, but what are we actually seeing? So actually after the meeting tonight, we're going to meet out there because it should be dark-ish and take some of those readings. So might have better information for you afterward, but that would be an interesting thing to point out or to find out is how do those numbers compare to what it feels like? And are those numbers the right thing for our community?
And I would just point out, so Woods Road currently is based on what it was when it was essentially at a rural level. So, there's been, I think, some lights put in at intersections, and Concert is very, very similar. So that's why we've talked about Concert really doesn't need anything because what we're gonna see more lighting along the pathway and stuff with Transition Parkway, but we haven't looked at the woods. Part of the reason we didn't do it is because we're replacing poles and still doing work in that area.
And
It'd
if
be
the-
nice to discuss, I think, so,
If the-
especially since so many people have brought it up to me, so.
It'll be interesting to know as a concern, dark, feeling that it's not bright enough in the neighborhoods or in the neighborhoods.
I could tell you in our cul-de-sac, that's not the case. And if you have a front bedroom, that light is a bother.
And I know it's a difficult topic, because, yeah, there's some people, so I don't know, maybe it's something about, can you dim them at a certain time, you know, where earlier in the evening they're brighter, and as the night goes on, they start dimming, I don't know. But
yeah.
I know where I live, it does stay dark.
Yeah, we've had complaints of too bright, not bright enough.
You can't make everyone happy, right?
Nope.
There was an effort several years ago. The prior mayor was actually the driver behind it as far as the interaction with me, at least, on making sure that when we have new developments where we have mailbox pods, we've got a street light nearby, so we don't have dark mailbox pods. So that is something we look at when we approve a development and their street lighting plans. When we added new street lights along Woods Road there, the very north edge, when it got rebuilt, the light was shining right into somebody's bedroom as soon as we were able to work through shielding options and get Pacific Power to install a shield that helped. So there are some ways of dealing with some of that. And maybe we should look at that in your neighborhood.
It doesn't bother me. My room's in the back, but the kids are up front.
Yeah.
Are those lights improved on the north end of Woods, are the LED?
Yes.
I understand they're more focused anyway. Is that right?
It depends on the fixture. There are a whole variety of fixtures out there that can spread light in different ways, different lumens, different, so it depends on what you get. And as we've discovered working through this on our new project with Pacific Power, it can be a little hard to get the specific information on the fixture that they end up installing. But they're working with us on it. Are there any questions on any of the other projects? Most of the ones in the subsequent years are continuations. I see a typo there, but we can fix that.
Now everyone's looking for the typo.
When it says of and it says FO instead. Okay. Should I go on to the next area?
Yes, unless you needed to cover the unfunded
This
projects.
Would anyone like to talk about the unfunded projects? Look at, okay. Stormwater, as you can see, this one is not going to take very long to talk about. So stormwater is kind of a new area still in our budget, and we are not planning any capital projects this year. We do collect stormwater SDCs, but they have not accumulated to a point where they're very useful for a capital project yet. And it'll be a little bit probably before they are. Was there a question?
Continue.
Okay.
Funding source is solid zeros for the next 5 years.
Right. So when we did our stormwater master plan, it did identify some projects, and we stuck them in here a couple of years ago. But after really reevaluating what those projects were and what we're seeing, they've all kind of dropped off the list as they're not really things that are critical that maybe the city should be doing. One of them, the one that was probably the highest priority at the time, is actually private property. And so council's changed a little bit over time. So we haven't funded list yet. But the other reason is we have no funding source for stormwater, like no revenue source, sorry, specifically for stormwater. So water and sewer, we have rates. Streets, we have the gas tax. The stormwater doesn't have that. So any funding for stormwater comes from the general fund and as a transfer. And you'll see that in the budget when we get there, besides the SDCs that we collect. And those SDCs can't be used for anything other than the capital capacity increasing improvements. So the little bit of budget that we're asking for to be transferred from the general fund for stormwater is all going toward maintenance. And to meet because we are really focused right now on meeting our MS4 permit requirements, that doesn't have to do with, for the most part, with capital projects. That's all about ongoing maintenance and program development. So We're not proposing any capital projects in stormwater right now, and we haven't projected any out in the 5-year projection. That doesn't mean that won't change in the next couple of years, but right now, the funds we have need to be focused on meeting our permit requirements.
Is there a way to tie the stormwater that accumulates in Millersburg Park to this?
We to our stormwater capital projects now, because it
If
doesn't
we need
improve.
drainage, you don't have to answer that now, but you can research it maybe.
That we would have to go redo our stormwater master plan to include projects in, well, we can add projects to the CIP without them being in the master plan, but we would need to develop projects that then we would put in the CIP for capital improvements, and we can only use system development charges if they're increasing the capacity. I'm not sure that addressing.
Increased use would be increased capacity.
I don't
from my
think that's
perspective.
what.
True. They may
So
not
increased
interpret it that
capacity would be you have a stormwater pipe that's undersized, and because of development now you have more runoff, so you need to upsize that pipe. You're increasing the capacity of the system.
Well, if we have 0, then we go to 6.
We can think about that.
Now, creativity.
Now,
So I do have a question.
But you're
for you.
saying there's a chance.
So you said stormwater doesn't have a funding source. Why can we not tie stormwater to the water and sewage bills? Since if I'm not mistaken, water and sewage, everyone pays for based on property. Based
Water
on
and
impervious surfaces,
No.
part of that
So-
charge is in that.
No.
so cities
No,
have
for runoff.
established, there are cities that have established a stormwater utility fee.
So that's not built into our water and sewage?
No.
Okay.
It's a separate fee. What we have maintained is, because of our industrial, and as long as we see growth in our industry, and we continue, and our citizens are supportive of that growth and value, we're able to keep from having to do that. That can be covered by our current tax base. Now, if we don't see growth, those will have to be like every other city, and that'll be an additional charge our citizens are going to start seeing to fund those things. We're hopeful that as we see development in our industrial areas, we can bring in high-value industrial, because that's what helps us provide the services to our residential. Residential doesn't pay for itself, and never has, neither does commercial. But the industry brings in large values to us in both a tax base and in franchise fees potentially. So that's what allows us to provide a 24/7 fire station right now with 3 people at $3.50. If we didn't have that, we wouldn't be able to. So as we see that development and we see our revenues increase and we see those general funds, then we can take and bring those general funds over into here and also into our streets. Same thing with streets. We don't have a fund other than what we get from state highway use tax, which doesn't cover that. And it's, gets into streets. That's going to be critical. We're hopeful that with what we can see potentially coming in for new value and our assessed value growing, that we can have those revenues at $3.50 to put those things in. So we never have to go out for bond measures for streets or go into a fee for transportation and things like that, and maintain, maybe even, at least maintain and maybe even lower, depending on what's going on. So those are things that are critical that we'll talk a little bit more about.
Okay. But thanks, because I just assumed that it was like, yeah, I know what assume stands for. But
Good question.
Good
Good
question.
question.
Excellent.
I think a lot of people think it's in that because they're used to it in other places.
Yeah.
so.
And when we adopted our stormwater municipal code sections a couple of years ago, we do have the structure in there to implement a stormwater fee if we chose to. So that's already in place, but we're hoping not to have to. One more fee for the people would have to pay. And when we get into water and sewer, those are called enterprise funds because they should be operated as a self-sustaining or independent, maybe is a better word, fund. So they're not supplemented by the general fund. They're not, except for some very specific exceptions, we're not taking money out of those funds to pay for something else, because that's why we're collecting the money is to, in your sewer rate, you're paying for your sewer, what it takes to serve you with the sewer system. Okay, wastewater. We have a couple of projects for this year. They're actually on the list. They're smaller projects when it comes to sewer. We have some repairs to do at the Burkhart and ATI force main discharges. And this is actually the location where this happens is in Talking Water Gardens. There's a couple of manholes there where those pipes discharge in. And this may look familiar if you remember from last year because we had it on our list this year, but we didn't get that done. So we'll be looking at doing it next year. There's some old drop structures inside because you don't want that water just shooting out. It causes all sorts of issues, corrosion being one, but also, if you need to get there to work on something, it comes into a structure that drops it down to the bottom, but they're old and rusted, and we would like to get them replaced before one of them rusts off completely and falls in, and then we have more of an emergency situation to deal with. And then there are several projects that make up the second one, the AMWRF, so that's the treatment plant capital projects. This is our portion of projects Albany is planning to do. So we pay 10% of the cost of capital projects at the treatment plant. They've already got these programmed in. If you look in your, this, it'll list out what those projects are. I just lumped them together. Let's see, they are, can't see it there either. If you'd like, I can break those out for you. I can pull up a spreadsheet that has them, but they're kind of the smaller capital projects that they need to do over the next year there. And they do their budget on a biennial basis. So those are, this is the first year of it, and then we'll have more in the next fiscal year.
You pay 10%?
We pay 10%. That's based on our IGA with them and our ownership structure with the plant. For wastewater, it's different for water. Did you have it?
That just seems off based on population. We definitely don't have 10% of the population.
We do not, and we don't have 10% of the flow to the plant either.
Yeah.
So we're not billed 10% of all of the costs. The operating costs were billed based on our percentage of flow to the plant every quarter when they bill us. But capital projects, it'd be like if we built our own treatment plant and it has, some parts are built with capacity for more in the future and just the way you would do that, but we'd have to pay the whole cost of a capital project, even if we're not utilizing all of that at once.
And the full operating
yeah.
maintenance. We're paying for 10% of the capacity. So that's even though we're not maybe treating all of that, it's no different that, if we were to build a wastewater treatment plant for handling 2 million gallons, and we're only running a 500,000 through it annually, we still have maintenance costs, ongoing maintenance costs for that percentage.
This is probably in the weeds a little bit, but what is the capacity?
Of the plant?
Yeah. I mean,
If you would like, I can get that information.
If you don't know, I'd be curious what capacity they're running at.
It depends.
Wet flow? Dry flow, I mean? Not wet flow.
Let me just pull it up because
You don't have to now. I can get that later.
Yeah, I'd be happy to share that with you later. So there's a wet weather and a dry weather capacity.
I'm just more curious of what percentage of the capacity they run at.
They just talked about it in that meeting. but
Yeah,
I don't have the
I
numbers.
can
Yeah.
pull those numbers
We
up.
can share with you our IGAs, but the IGAs spell all of that out. We have the ability to buy capacity if we need to. In fact, we've had that discussion because, if we have depending on the type of industry it comes in, there is capacity available that we may need to purchase additional capacity. So we have that capability.
So dry weather flow of the plant capacity right now is 12 MGD and our share is 1.2 MGD, million gallons per day. Wet weather flow is 68 million gallons per day. And then we have 6.8 million gallons per day of that. So for wastewater treatment, you have both because when you get those higher flows, some treatment parts that can be bypassed, some still meet your criteria, but you have to be able to deal with both wet weather and dry weather because the amount, those flow rates vary so much seasonally because of infiltration into the system. It's just a reality. We try to minimize it as much as possible, but that's how things work.
I'm more curious, you don't know what percentage
that
the
we're
plant
using?
that the plant runs.
Oh,
I'm just curious on how much room they have for growth at this point.
They have room. I'd have to look up those numbers. We get reports in our bills that tells me how much they're actually operating at. And that, when you're operating a plant, water or wastewater, you operate to the need, right? So if you're getting less flow in, you're operating at less. If you're getting more flow in, you're operating at more, regardless of, the capacity. So you've got to scale up and down all the time or hold things longer in different parts of the process to get the
Sorry,
right
I said a
rates.
little bit in the weeds. So.
Yeah.
Right.
Well,
And when
just-
when they did the last major improvements, they built for 20 year.
I believe, that's typically what you would do when you do an improvement. It's for the 20-year anticipated flow. But they have seen less flow than they projected when they originally did this. And there's probably multiple reasons for that. Industry is a big one. If industries ramp up or down or leave, depending on the type, that can have a big impact. I can tell you our use right now, we're using about 50% of our capacity, or at least we were a year ago when I plugged in those numbers. On average, I could open up any recent report from them and tell you instantaneously what it was, but to average that over time, we've been at about half of the capacity that we own.
Just some of the background on that, the city, we used to not own any of it, and we just paid a fee straight up, and they charged us more than actually the residential folks. And at the time, we didn't have any control, really any reserve. So we were really at the mercy of Albany in allowing what could potentially come in industry if there was a large, output of that, or residential even. And so all that took place around the same time as that we got our water rights from the Sandy Am and started that adventure. And it was a great opportunity for, I think, Millersburg at the time to partner. And it was sort of a little bit of struggle with the sewer, but we had a little bit of an upper hand on the water because we were the ones in the driver's seat of that initially. And water was a problem for Albany. And so they got on board, and that was when all the sort of the partnership developed. There was definitely in the past some not the best relations with Albany, but that time with council, as we developed that partnership, that really helped and it's paved the line for future growth in us here now. So there's a little bit of background on that.
Well, the
if you
reason I
didn't
was
know.
asking the question really was to see what's their capacity, what we purchased with that 10%, and any planned expansion, whether it's residential or industry. Are we going to be reaching that 10% cap, and should we look sooner at expanding 10%, or is it fine?
Yeah.
That's
Right.
what I was trying to get at.
Our biggest challenge right now would be to reach our full 10%. We have to do something with our ATI lift station and our conveyance to the facility. They do have capacity. We've had that discussion with some of the industries, and if that came to that point, we have the ability. They have enough that we have the ability at that point to negotiate an additional.
To buy more, yeah, that was talked about,
yeah.
and there was actually, I remember in the drawings, I mean, this is going back a long time ago, but they even showed that we could actually then, they could put in another area of growth in their site there.
Okay.
So that there's definitely room for capacity to build in and then for us to purchase, if I remember correctly on that. And maybe just on that is there's compost that they're doing now, and there's things happening down there that they're really developing out, and soon to be a public type use of the compost that's being made there. And I'll report back, or staff can, when that comes forward, but they're definitely making some headway with some neat things going on.
We will probably see some of that product being on display here at City Hall in our beds in the future.
We'll probably do a trial area because we did talk with the landscaper when we were at the fire station, and who's used this material or material like this, and pointed out that it does it looks nice and dark at first. No, and then it gets silvery over time. So is that a look that you want? And yes, it grows mushrooms, but he said because of the heat that's generated. But he said that's a sign that it's doing what it's supposed to do. Like it's not a bad thing, but we'll do a test area. He's doing this in their parks right now, in some areas, and see if an area, something we want to put on all our beds or just use in some specific locations, but it's being offered to us.
I don't know the classification, if it's called class or type, but it is a type, I know it's a three actually, like 3A. It's the highest level of compost grade you can get. So it can be used for gardens. It can be used for any use. So it's sort of pretty cool that they're doing that and trying to, go that direction.
I would just add, we have an excellent working relationship with Albany on our water and wastewater and just everything in general. And when we have an interest from an industry coming in, depending on what their needs are, we're usually in conversation with Albany, talking about it and looking at, this is something that can be handled. But
No, it sounds like
we
we're good.
enjoy.
Like I said, I was just more curious if we're gonna have to plan on an increase.
Someday,
Someday.
yes. That someday could come much quicker with a large industrial use coming in, but because water and wastewater particularly are so varied between types of industries. I mean, there's big industries out there that have almost no wastewater discharge, and then other than just their employees, and then there are some that are huge impacts. It's hard to plan for that. But yeah, and we are fortunate that there's excess capacity that we could purchase from them versus having to build it. But there is the ability to expand both plants as well.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. The projects, Kevin mentioned the conveyance. ATI pump replacement will, if we replace the pumps at the ATI lift station, that'll get us more capacity than we have now for conveying the water to the wastewater plant. System expansion south of Concert Road, as that area develops, there's going to be system expansion costs. But part of that would be about that capacity piece and getting it to the treatment plant. And you'll see in the budget later that we have applied for a grant for a study, a feasibility study for that expanded capacity work that would happen before any capital project would happen. And then we've got a project out there a few years for the sewer in the Morningstar Road realignment. So there's an agreement with Lynn County that's been in place for a while that they'll realign Morningstar Road. The right-of-way was established several years ago, and our part will be putting the water and the sewer in when that goes in. So the timeline on that is a little unknown. We're showing it 3 years out. It might be more, probably won't be less, but that's out there.
Just a little background on that. That was originally put in place when Samaritan bought the property across from Love's there in that area. At the time, they were expecting to see something going out there fairly quick, and they were on a tight time frame. That has changed. I don't know where they're at, but the last we had discussions with them, there wasn't the push for that. Now, if something were to change and Samaritan came in and said, we need to do this, that can have to be looked at potentially. So that is required for the development of that property in that location.
And I'll just point out on the wastewater unfunded list, there is a project for increased conveyance capacity to the AMWRF for $5 million. That is a very high level estimate, but that's what we're talking about studying. Like if we had to do a whole new route to the treatment plant, new pump stations, possibly more than one, there's multiple creek crossings, there's a lot of constraints. We wanted to have a placeholder in here for that, but that study will help us kind of refine that concept.
And what's reflected here is our current representative 10%.
What was that?
What's reflected here, the 5
That would
million.
be ours.
This
That's
is all ours.
That's all us.
Yeah. We own all the conveyance is owned to the plant is owned by us.
Yeah.
Now, most likely, if we had a large industry come in that was pushing that, they would be paying for a significant portion of that as well as state grants and things like that. But it is something we need to be looking at and as we see further growth and stuff as well.
And part of the reason for getting that on our list and identified is because of that, with Sofidel looking at coming, they would be a large wastewater customer. And in order to work through the state to pursue grants, we got to have some concept of what the project would be. So that $5 million was actually in earlier discussions, what we were estimating, like, okay, if we have to just do this from scratch, add up all the pieces, it would probably be about $5 million. But we'll refine that more as we go forward.
And, with that, they would have been paying, if we had an industry like that coming in that needed that, they would be paying for a significant portion of that. But it would give us significant capacity for the future growth expansion that, as well, because, it doesn't cost, the big cost is getting the line there and expanding it. That portion is much less. So that's where, I don't know that our public necessarily understands the value that the industry brings to us in those things. And that's exactly why we have, like, a residential area has the water and sewer it has today, is because they needed that. And when we had the funding, it was much easier for us to expand that. So.
And just in case if it was unclear in this, because I realized I didn't say this up front. So wastewater plant, we own 10%, so 10% of the capital. Water's a little different because it's different splits depending on which part of the plant we're talking about, but 50% of the intake and 16.67% of the storage and
50% storage.
50% storage, sorry, 16% of the treatment plant. But all of our infrastructure in Millersburg, the conveyance for the sewer as a collection, the pipes, the manholes, the pump stations, all of that, and for water, all the pipes that take it to the homes, everything within our city limits is solely owned by us. So all the project costs associated by that are ours. We do contract with Albany for maintenance on operation of those systems because they got the staff and equipment to deal with it. And we pay them basically time and materials to take care of those things for us. But any capital projects are ours.
Thank you. That was very thorough.
Okay. And our last area here is water. So we have.
I'm gonna ask one more question on wastewater then, because you're not gonna talk about the unfunded.
Oh.
Does the system expansion to underserved Northeast and so that number one unfunded, can that not be used with the SDC funds?
Yes, SDC, that is eligible for SDC funds.
So I'm curious, why are we leaving it as unfunded? Because again, there's quite a bit of cash in those accounts.
Well, so, capital projects are pretty expensive. And right now there isn't a driving need to do that. For most of the expansions of our system in the past, they've been driven by development. So right now, nobody is coming in and saying, I need this here. And it's a little different with water there because we know that it doesn't have fire protection the way we would like. So that's a higher priority for us. But we keep those lists on. Someday that's going to need to be expanded, but we don't necessarily want to go use our limited SDC money. We'd like those to accumulate so they're big enough we can use them on substantial projects. If we don't let them build up for a while,
So it's unfunded, but you don't need it to be funded at this time.
we don't need it to be funded at this time, but we do want it to be identified as a need.
Okay. Thank you.
And often if we had something come in up there that met state requirements, number one, as Janelle said, a lot of times it's going to be paid for with the industry with their connection fees. We'll cover that. But we're also often, we can get, there may be grants depending on the jobs and the value that's coming in. There may be grant funding and outright, or it's paid from funds from the state. So.
And it does, when we have unfunded projects, it doesn't mean that we plan to pay for them. We have a project right now up in that Northeast area for a truck wash facility. And one of the conditions of approval was they've got to extend water and sewer to their part of the site because they're a landlocked parcel, but it has access and just the way that property has evolved over the years. So they're going to get us partway in. So that's great. And that's just a condition. They can't develop their project without it, but should the city go pay for it for them, they're getting SDC credits. They're not having to pay SDCs because they're building a project that's on there, but it helps us and it helps them reduce their costs.
And it helps provide for fire protection in an area that's desperately needed, that if we had something today, would be difficult.
So, water. The first project on this list is transferring services from AC Pipe and Old Salem Road north of Truex Creek. So what this is we have an old asbestos cement water line parallel with a newer ductile iron main in that same area, all down Old Salem Road. Some sections of the old AC pipe have been abandoned already, but there's a north section and a south section that are still in our system. They are intertied with the ductile iron line, but we have services still off of that. So this one is our three largest industries, ATI, Flakeboard, and what is now Bakelite, used to be GP. So this project will be basically taking the services off that old line and connecting to the new line. It sounds like a simple project, but we're an ODOT right-of-way, county right-of-way. We've got to completely redo a meter vault that's no longer up to standards, and the meter's old, needs replaced. So project's been on the list for a little while. You'll see it in 23, 24, and 24, 25, because we're working with the industry shutdown periods. We need to do part of it in July, and we're just not going to get there for this July because the amount is, as we've advanced the project, we've discovered the cost is going to be well above what's required for public bidding for that portion of it. So we're going to have to go through the full public bidding process, and there just isn't going to be time to get that done. And procurement for water parts is still long lead time. So anyway, that's the long story for why that's split up over 2 years. We're planning to do a smaller part this year and then the bigger part the next year.
Did you say what the size of the AC line was?
It's a 12-inch.
We're gonna go to 20 with
The ductile is 20.
Already is 20.
Okay. The ductile's already 20. It already exists. It's some work to transfer the services over to the newer line. Once we've done that, we can abandon that section of AC line. We were gonna try to, well, we're not going to abandon it. We were going to abandon it completely, but now we're just gonna kind of valve it off and leave it as an option because ODOT has some specific requirements about abandonment, and it goes under a creek, and it just got even more complicated. In the future, we do have a plan. You see it in plan year 25, 26. It's to deal with the south end. There are many smaller services down there that would need transferred over.
We actually talked about exploring whether we could pipe burst it and use it for a new conveyance potentially, but that's not going to work.
No. Creative.
We've been fortunate that that line is held up well, but when AC lines go, they tend to go catastrophically. So we'd like to not have that happen and get it out of our system.
The big one's coming.
There's no indication this one has any issues, and we've cut into it a couple times for tie-ins, and it's been in really good shape actually for its age. But
Very good.
this was put in well before the city existed. I don't even know what year it went in, so it's been there a long time.
And it's actually a cement pipe.
So those two pipes, you're looking at 2023 to 24, this fiscal year coming. And then the following fiscal year, the finishing the AC pipe.
So.
And then what's that? Is that accurate?
So this coming year would be just dealing with ATI's service, actually.
Right.
And where their vault is at. Then the next year would be dealing with Bakelite and Flakeboard because they're in the same location and they're right at Bakelite's entrance. It's going to be disruptive.
yeah.
It's
gonna be a mess.
It's a tough spot.
Yeah.
Right there by the on and off ramps, and yeah. So it's going to be complicated. And then the 25, 26 one you're seeing is the south end, which is more. It's multiple businesses. I think there's 15 or so.
So that's another, that will
That's a
be
separate project.
another,
We'll
but
deal
that'll be another line that we put in.
No.
The line's in, we're just
It's in,
transferring.
we're just transferring.
Transferring services. So what transferring services
Parallel
mean?
right next to each other.
Yeah. Sometimes
I mean, it's so much more
I know.
expensive. It's like,
Well, there's 15 companies.
it might be
Yeah.
even more than
Yeah.
15, but it's to do this, you do a hot tap on the main. So these are hot taps on a 20-inch main, which are not cheap, regardless of the size you're tapping. And then running that new line.
YouTube that if you want to know what it looks like. It's pretty amazing.
I think I just saw one like that.
Could it come-
That one that just, and it blew, yeah.
Should have
We
seen
don't
it
want
when
that
they
to-
did for the
Fire
fire
station.
station.
Yeah,
Oh, really?
Tapped it for an 18 coming off it.
yeah.
Impressive.
It was a big tap.
Yeah, gosh.
You think your beer kegs impressive.
If it goes right, you shouldn't see anything,
Yeah, you
actually.
should say
If it goes right.
Yeah, it goes right.
If it goes wrong on a 20-inch,
It should be fine.
not pretty.
But because there's so many of them to do and all these separate services, and then you've got to cut the road for each one of these, and it just adds up to a lot.
I was just wondering if there's only any value of doing basically the next 2 years all in.
Because
It's gonna be a mess, so let's just be a mess once.
And we're working around shutdowns for.
Yeah.
ATI and Bakelite
Yeah.
and everything, so.
The ones in the
that's-
south won't
yeah.
be difficult to coordinate. And when we do the tie-in and their services down and we tie in, that's really short.
Hmm.
It's a little more with these bigger industries and bigger lines. but that can be done in a matter of hours. So it's not an issue so much with the small ones for downtime. It's just, because the south is all in one location, these north ones have some very specific requirements. We split them into two separate projects.
All right.
And Randy's got the crew to do that?
Yeah, we will be contracting.
Randy does.
Albany doesn't want to tackle these for us either.
Ah.
Some of these kinds of things, Albany will, like when we tap a main for a new residential connection, they do that for us. But a project like this
industrial, yeah.
is something they would contract out as well. The next project, system expansion to industrial property south of Consor, that's our water main in Transition Parkway. And the reason why that number is so much higher than our street work is more of the cost is shifted to that year because of material procurement. That usually happens pretty early in the construction package. And we were considering potentially procuring materials ourselves. I don't know if you remember, we talked about that. We don't think we're going to need to do that now. And we're going to go with HDPE pipe because it doesn't have the lead time issues and it's significantly less expensive than ductile, but, and it's allowed in our system. But anyway, that's why you see that number higher because we've shifted more of the costs early for procurement. The AMWTP, that's our treatment plant, IT and SCADA upgrades, and then the acid wash lines. Those are pretty small amounts. Those are our percentage of costs for projects that Albany's doing at the water treatment plant. Are there any other questions on any of the other projects or unfunded projects?
Disregard. I was just looking at one item, but I remember it from our meeting, the generator for that second year, 2024, 25.
Yes. Yeah, 24, 25, the generator,
Yeah,
the
I
treatment
remember
plant.
that the overall price was, I think it was it 800,000 or something?
So
like
there's
that?
actually two generators
Is it?
that
Yeah,
were
oh,
there. One has been taken off, so they were planning on one for the intake. Albany used ARPA funds for that, so we do not have that. But this one will be for making sure that the plant stays up and running in the case of a loss of power for treatment.
Right.
Treatment
I just
plants.
remember, that, yeah, I had a conversation with them
So
about
we
that.
actually had, so a couple of years ago, they were actually planning on two different generator projects. One was for the intake. That one's now being funded completely by ARPA. Albany's covering, so we don't have any percentage in that. And then this one will be for the water treatment plant itself.
And they rather generously said, we're getting ARPA funds for this, so we're not paying for it either. So we'll just we won't charge you
That was
anything
nice.
for it.
Nice, yeah.
Scott, the generator here, this would be our 16.67% of the.
Is that what it is,
cost.
16? Yeah,
Yeah.
because I think I remember a number is close, like 800,000 for the generator or something like that.
Yeah.
Or,
It's a big generator.
What's that?
Big generator.
Big generator. 800,000, yeah. Better be able to power quite a bit up. But that was, I know I brought up the conversation with them about it because I thought I was like, well, is there ways to, maybe put something on contract or move or where, because that generator's not going to be used all that often, but they've had some moments that, that they definitely were starting to worry. The ice storm, I believe came up and a couple other times, the earth shakes. And there's going to be a number of other things, but that might be another problem too.
I'd equate the water treatment plant as no different than a fire station. We don't want to wait, and if we have a loss of power, that we have to call and try to get a generator in. Because I guarantee you, everyone's going to be calling and trying to get generators, and especially with the size of this one's required. I think when we had the initial
5
discussions,
years out.
there's maybe one available in Oregon
Yeah,
of that size. So
it's going to be big. Yeah, huge.
And I did look, I should have been able to do the math there. The overall project budget we plugged in was $1 million.
Is it $1 million?
So that's our
Yeah.
16.7% of that. But the real project cost will get refined and, by the time we're actually budgeting it, we'll have better numbers from them. And that was the last of the capital projects.
So before we continue, why don't we take a 5-minute break for personal?
Now the mic's back.
I just reminded you of it. That's what it was. Well,
Janelle, why wouldn't we put the mailbox right there?
Right there?
On the other side, in the flower
Across
bed.
the parking?
Yeah, cut a little concrete pad, set it there.
We
It's out of the
could.
way.
So we were looking at moving boxes to the far side. That could be an option, but by the time we cut into the hillside, anywhere along here, we were looking at farther down there, but it could be over here. Anywhere along there we do that, we're gonna end up building a retaining wall. It doesn't look like you would need that much, but there's certain clearances they require around them. We also have to be under camera, so we need to keep them over there.
For the ballot, okay.
Yeah, for the ballot, and they like mailbox under camera too.
Yeah.
But the ballot is required. So we looked at putting it across the parking lot, and that was iffy, and then it actually got to redo irrigation, we've got to cut into that side, we've still got to do concrete work.
I was just thinking people would see it as they're going by.
Oh, I see.
If it's, you know,
Yeah.
oh, hey, there's a
On the
mailbox
side.
there. How many people know that that mailbox is there?
By the number of people that come by, apparently a lot.
Okay, good.
And we've actually asked the postal service, we've been asking for a while, and we're asking again with this project for a parcel drop box, because people come and stuff parcels in there and clog it up all the time.
Oh,
So we're hopeful, the answer was if we happen to have one available when you ask for it, then we could give you one. The other thing is included in those numbers is we could potentially buy our own. You know, like a neighborhood mailbox pod, those are purchased separately. The post office has to approve it,
Yeah.
but, so we did include the thought in there of buying our own parcel box because like we watch them out the window because it's right outside our window. Like, don't do it. Especially around Christmas. Oh yeah. And then, and then they leave and the next person comes and I can't put my mail in.
when was the last time we've had a conversation with the post office about getting a post office?
About 6 months ago?
It's probably been longer than that. We've asked, we did get Millersburg added to the address and
Yeah, but there seems to be a lot of issues.
Maybe it's
that
a
I
year
keep
ago
hearing
now,
By not having our own zip code.
they said it will never happen.
Yeah.
We have no control over it and it's never gonna happen.
But they should be able to give us the zip +4 that is specific out here, because that +4 is the route in the carrier.
That's true.
So if
Maybe.
these services and the schools start collecting that,
Yeah.
then they can narrow it down to these are
Maybe so.
Millers.
It would be nice to have a way for these organizations to tell us how many, right, based off the zip code, because that seems to be the holdup.
It would be nice. It has been an ongoing conversation and the staff
Yeah.
has changed regularly at the post office over time. So the new postmaster there, I don't know that we,
Or even if we did something to get the word out for people to start using Millersburg instead of Albany.
we do
I do.
try and maybe we can.
When I first moved here 18 years ago, the only piece of mail that came with Millersburg on it was the power bill.
Yeah, I don't think you realize how fortunate we are out here that we have the industry. Yeah. Because, some of these smaller jurisdictions that I go to, they don't have money for law enforcement, they don't have money for sewer, water, they just are, every time you go to one of their meetings, they're like.
Well, that's what a lot of people around here don't understand. But when they're fighting us on bringing industry in, is that's how we have what we have, especially for such a small community.
That's exactly right. I mean, some of them.
Otherwise, our taxes would be huge.
Yes, they struggle immensely to fund anything.
Oh, so yeah, industry, we would have these 10,000 square foot lots and homes and stuff.
Yeah, no, definitely wouldn't have the tax, at least not with water and sewage and.
Sorry, my phone went off. I thought I told my watch not to allow that to happen. But I called him back. It was for you, and I said you're in a meeting. So-
Okay, thanks. got these all for you? You guys staying busy over there? Oh, yeah. So you over there? What's your Asia?
We're doing we switched up schedules this year. So I think they just went. That's pretty off.
Feeling better, John?
Oh, a little bit.
A little bit?
Yeah. I'm not real patient.
Oh,
I'm so impatient.
being sick is a total waste of time.
It scares me.
Yep.
I mean,
But the way I have to fight it is actually just to lay down and just sleep it off so that my body takes care of what it. Yep. And that way I can be bounced back and.
yeah.
I heard that.
Oh, yeah.
All the stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah,
We
if
will
I
have
try
the
to fight
ability if
it
you want to.
I can go dragging it out.
I wouldn't mind, yes.
If you were at that point, you want to even just listen to it.
So.
Your body tells us, and we tend not to listen.
Well, I don't get sick very often. I mean, this is the first cold I've had in 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
I've never had COVID.
Yeah.
Well, 5 o'clock, that sounds like the dreaded drinking when it's.
Oh, last year.
I think last year was the first time I got sick in about 5 years. And so we had the COVID test in the house, took it negative, waited 3 days, took it again, negative. I'm like, all right.
I know.
It was.
You know, it's funny.
I had that for the first time. And I
It's a magnet. Where's my little gavel? No. Let's bring it back together.
Yeah, you have my pages all backwards. I'm like, that's not. I'm like, why are we starting in the middle of it?
Are you reading a book?
Yeah, like the first.
Did you break it?
Well, the pages were just backwards. It just started at 20, the ones that came with top. And so I was like trying to figure out where we were. I was like, why are we going backwards?
Yeah, Bryce. I guess it's you. I'm here.
We've already had to replace a bunch of systems that fell off.
I'm not sure how you did that one.
It's like, yeah, the first like 30 of them were.
It's one of the rocks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's certain things I see that you think you snapped off.
And I'm like, that takes a lot of
This needs to go 3 inches that way.
We just need to put something over it. Or put a bar or something there.
I just want to give you a hard time.
All right, let's reconvene.
I've been given a hard time now before meetings. It was your turn.
Okay, all right. So the budget message for fiscal year 23-24. Our proposed budget maintains a status quo regarding personnel and operations within the general fund, except for our receipt of a grant to begin the design work for a new park in the northwest area of town, off Millersburg Drive. Number of projects are anticipated if planned industrial development projects move forward. We have a new economic development fund that we've created. This fund will be a repository for funds from sale of city grant funds received to support development and utilized for tracking expenditures, which should be eligible for reimbursement under the state's regional significant industrial sites, RISA's economic development program. This program provides state income tax reimbursements based on employment value to new industries, and they can be used for funds for reimbursements for qualified site readiness activities. Our strategic plan, associated facility master plans, capital improvements program, along with our development code, municipal code, and policies and procedures continue to provide guiding principles for the development of our budget. This past year, We experienced a 4.1% increase in our assessed value to our tax base. So our tax base is now at $674,946,284. And even though we're expected to see major industrial projects start this year, it's unlikely we'll see the assessed value increases associated with these developments until fiscal year 24-25 at the earliest. Given the current slowdown of the economy, we're continuing to be conservative with regards to our revenue projections. However, we do expect to see electrical franchise fees increase this year due to significant investments and production increases at ATI. Major projects envisioned for this year include the completion of design work and potential construction starting in the fourth quarter for the extension of Transition Parkway, the buffer / linear park, and water lines to service the city industrial property. We also proceed the upgrade and extension of Arnold Road water line and support industrial development of properties fronting Arnold Road and the Wilbur Ellis project on the west side of the Burlington Railroad tracks. In addition, the potential anticipated sales of property and projects in the new Economic Development Fund represents an approximately $10 million increase in our overall proposed budget when compared to our current 22-23 budget. This past fiscal year noted the completion of our new fire station at $6.5 million, and including the outfitting of that station and staffing with a 3-person paramedic engine company. It was made possible because of our strong industrial base. This fiscal year, we anticipate potential development of vacant city-owned industrial property south of Consul Road, both east and west of the tracks, as mentioned earlier. Numerous projects, both public and private, are proposed to occur this budget year, including road, water, and wastewater extensions to service those industrial zone properties. We also expect development of county-owned property, essentially on the east side of Old Salem, just east, pretty much across from our city-owned property. That is proposed to be a company named Amium. They're looking at a facility that will produce metallurgical biocarbon from waste wood products for the replacement of coal and steel manufacturing. It will result in significant reduction in net CO2 in the production of steel. It can also be used as a replacement for coal and power facilities. Just a brief history. I'm just going to catch some of this. Prior to incorporation in 1974, we were identified as an important industrial hub in the region because of our unique how we're uniquely situated in this area, with access to major highways, the Union Pacific Railroad and Burlington Northern Railway systems, all within our southern industrial areas. Our boundary included a strong established industrial base, and that base provides the city with funding for the development of our water and wastewater treatment facilities and joint ownership, which we now have joint ownership with the city of Albany. Conveyance for structure required to provide water and wastewater service to our community was also made possible because of the strong industrial base. The provisions and expansion of water and wastewater structure enabled us to develop our residential areas over the last 40 years. In 1974, the city was providing 3,045 manufacturing jobs in the region. Since that time, we have lost 3 major employers. And based on the most recent data the state has from 2021, we've actually lost 1,578 jobs since our initial incorporation. We're at about 1,500 jobs now in the region. Provided to the region. Urban growth boundary has decreased by 232 acres, and the use of additional industrial zone lands has been impacted by changes to regulatory, environmental, and industrial practices. Those combined changes have resulted in a net reduction in the city's developable industrial lands from 1,360 acres identified in 1974 to just over 830 acres today, or a 40% reduction. The reduction in developable industrial zone lands prompted the city to begin the process of a 162-acre UGB swap request a year ago. The property proposed for the swap is contiguous to city-owned property industrial lands currently available for development. Swap would have created a potential for a tract of land exceeding 200 acres, which numerous manufacturing industries are currently seeking. The proposed swap is a process allowed under Oregon Department of Land Conservation and Development regulations where a city UGB can be modified without increasing the total area of the approved UGB. The swap met DOCD's regulatory requirements, and we involved city county planning staff together with city staff mapped out the process that we would be following for that swap. Both owners of the property involved in the proposed swap were also in favor. Both proposed parcels were previously owned by Willamette Industries and IP and were utilized for water treatment activities associated with the former paper mill. The parcel proposed to be removed from the city's UGB was owned by IP and zoned industrial. with the decoupling of the mill site from and its discharge permit, really put that property where it was no longer usable for water treatment. And because its location within a floodway, based on today's standards, it's not practically developable for other industrial uses, and a conservation use was being proposed. So the property proposed for the swap into the UGB was previously requested for a UGB expansion by Williams Industries in 1987 and again in 1997, which didn't move forward primarily because we had so much, our original comp plan was developed in 1984. So the process in which we were requesting UGB swap wasn't available at that point. So they did not move forward with those at that point. The facility that could have represented 1,000 jobs of $1 billion investment was interested in that, and it's very rare to see a company with that level of investment and associated manufacturing jobs pursuing locations in our region. Unfortunately, Lynn County voted to deny the swap. So at this point, that project is not moving forward. I want to highlight some of the services provided by our property tax revenue. We enjoy one of the lowest tax rates of city in Lynn County at only $3.50 per thousand. Even with that tax rate, we're able to provide 24/7 fire and EMS protection with no additional fire district taxes. No other city of our size in our region can provide this level of service. Our new fire station staffed with a 3-person paramedic engine company, which was built without the need for a bond levy or additional taxes. Based on our current assessed values, 50% of our total tax revenue is provided by our current commercial and industrial base. At the time of incorporation, that was actually over 85%. The percentage of industrial value is unheard of in the vast majority of communities, and as our industrial base did not exist, we would be looking at a city tax rate over $7.70 per thousand, more than double our current rate, or 120% increase, which we wouldn't be able to do regardless. I mean, we just wouldn't be providing the services that we have today. We could not get, even if we wanted to, we could not have that rate. We are currently in a position where we do not need to have additional fees for stormwater management, operating levies, and public safety services. We are also currently able to maintain our streets without need for bond measures. We provide library card and recreation fund reimbursements. Improvements to our parks and trail systems are all within our current resources. The importance of our industrial base to our ongoing financial health cannot be understated. Our industrial base has provided funding for development of the water and wastewater systems, which has allowed our residential development. Our ability to adopt 10,000 square foot minimum lot sizes is also related to the tax and franchise fee value that's represented with our industrial properties and provide us the ability to meet our daily operational requirements. We currently have 60 of our 135 acres of city-owned property south of Contra Road under contract for sale with a Fortune 500 company. This project would result in up to 300 manufacturing jobs, $400 million in capital investment, along with significant electric franchise fees. As one of the driving factors for the proposed extension of Transition Parkway and the development of the buffer/linear park that's included in this year's budget. We also have 25 or approximately 65 acres of property zoned on the west side of Burlington Northern and Portland Western Railroad tracks, south of Contra Road, under contract with Wilbur Ellis. Its property is south of and contiguous to the property we propose to be brought in with the UGB swap. So we expect them to move forward, but we are running a little bit of a challenge in getting access to that, because even though we have an access approved through the county, it's only for servicing agricultural use. So it would be difficult probably to see further development in the future on that, based on that restriction right now for that access, given that the UGB swap did not occur. The property south of Contra Road have been planned for industrial development since the incorporation of the city in 1974. The additional tax revenues and franchise fees from development of these and other industrial zone properties will allow this council to consider further service enhancements to our community. And I've listed them out there. I'm not going to read them. You can see them. They're also on our website. Talks about things that we've talked about. In closing, as always, staff remains committed and dedicated to providing a high level of service to our citizens. Encourage them to contact the city with any questions they may have. So with that, any questions with regards to the budget message?
Thank you. That was a very thorough message.
And in depth, thank you. Any questions?
Proceed.
All right, we would like to just go into some city trends and history, just to give that. We'll go through this fairly quickly. So some of these were questions that came up, so that's probably a good time. The area of the city today actually shrunk since our budget meeting. We actually withdrew 168 in anticipation of potential swap. So we're 167 acres smaller. So we're 2,683 acres today. We're approximately a mile wide in east-west direction. 3.5 miles in a north-south direction. Our current population is 3,142. Again, we have approximately 1,500 manufacturing jobs as of 2021 for the state. Our major industrial employment companies for the Albany-Millersburg area is a dominant factor in the economy of the whole valley. And those of you who may have been here when the paper mill closed, that mill represented 300 jobs. And it had a significant economic impact when that left, not only on Millersburg, but the whole region. We saw a lot of restaurants close, a lot of other commercial activities. I would say, probably a devastating, I think it's probably fair to say a devastating impact.
Secondary and tertiary industries left as well.
Yeah, lots of other industries that were. And that's, I think, one of the reasons why it's so surprising to us with the lack of support and denial on the UGB swap. When you look
Hence
at
being
top
down
jobs.
1,500 manufacturing.
The area is almost equally divided between industrial and residential. This is just our historical and forecast trends. You can see there for Millersburg, this is from Portland State, so they're saying that by 2045, it would be over 5,000. And that's a key number that we're not going to talk about tonight, but that's a number Matt keeps a close eye on, because once we hit that, there's a lot of other regulations and stuff that come to us. I would imagine once we see the rest of the build out of our core area, we'll be at that number. Good chance that we'd be at that number.
Is it 5,000 or 5,400 that is the tripwire?
5,000 is when we have to start planning for how we're going to incorporate density into our city, and we won't have a choice.
So, but as we've said, the city's intent is to maintain the area north of Concert and west of Old Salem, 1,000 square foot lots.
We even put a policy into our new housing element of our comprehensive plan specifically to make sure that happens. So even as the state ramped up a requirement for density, we can fall back on a policy and say, well, we're not allowed to put it north of Concert or west of Old Salem. Not allowed pursuant to our policies. We'll have to find someplace else for it.
How do you do that? Then if there's not available land, is it expansion of the UGB then? That's it?
Yeah. And that can be interesting because for us to expand our UGB, we're going to have to go into EFU land somewhere.
East or west?
East, west, or north. We're surrounded by EFU
Not
lands.
south. No, we can't.
Can't go south.
Can't go south.
What is the estimate with the available potential, like if there's some of the open fields that we have off of Woods Road? I mean, that's pretty much the only left that's in our, what's that gonna grow us out?
Some north of Millersburg Drive.
I think that's what.
Oh, yeah,
we
that's true.
We're saying if those develop, we'll probably be at 5,000. So
Right.
keep in mind, these
Give or
numbers
take,
here
yeah.
are population projections from PSU, and that 2% growth on the side is what they're basing this on, which is
2%.
high in their estimates. But what we saw over the past few years when property was available, where development was like 7%.
6 to 7%.
So we were projecting in 3 to 5 years, we'd be built out if we kept going at that rate.
We were in
The
the
only
teens
thing
at
that
one year.
slowed it down was lack of willing sellers.
Okay.
So right now, so the current property on Woods Road that just was finished, I believe there's what,
27?
27 lots,
They broke
and we
ground.
already have.
They already broke ground. I was over there today. Very excited.
And they're breaking already, and we've already, I think, 20 lots we've been told, they've already turned in permits for.
Correct. No, only 10 permits so far, but the same company who turned in those 10 has purchased 20.
So, things have slowed down right now with interest rates and stuff, but I would imagine once that changes, but the driving factor will be the fact that most of the large parcels we have left right now, those owners are not interested in seeing development. So that's really what's going to probably have a key factor on this. So, okay, next slide.
Is there conversation about reducing the size of lot sizes? I know that there's 10, the 10,000 is a
what we have looked at is what the city has discussed at planning and council and stuff is we want to maintain the area that we have now at 10,000 square foot lots. Our intent is once we hit that, we know we have to expand our UGB. Now, this will be an interesting thing based on what's just happened because we're going to have to expand. Our city limits is our UGB. We don't have an area to go larger. So, but what's been discussed is most likely go east because that's where our water's coming from now. With the potential interchange coming in with this location going over to that area. And then at that point, we would look at going to the more dense housing that we would have. But even with that, I think something that the Planning Commission, what we've heard from council is even when we have to go to those higher density housings and we have to look at multifamily, we want to have things that we make sure it's drawing in that we have nice looking, well-designed facilities.
Master plan community. Locations.
Yes.
Not just plunked down.
Yeah, and have it a thought out plan for it. And we can talk about some other time, Matt, we want to have to talk with you, but one of the things when we hit that position, we're going to have to start looking at I just went blank on the term for the hubs for climate friendly
area.
Climate friendly area.
Which is key word for mixed uses is what the state really wants to see. So people can live really close to where they work and walk to work and not have to drive, have transit coming in, that kind of stuff. And so we're hoping that when we hit that magic point, we're going to be able to do a master planned community, which will then make sure all of that is incorporated right from the build out. So all the neighbors know what they're getting, everybody understands what's coming, and it's on the other side of the freeway, hopefully from all these 10,000 square foot lots that are absolutely petrified of density.
So one of the things we did take into consideration was the placement of our fire station and Transition Parkway, because it's designed to line up with the future attachment to the new interchange. So we're in a good spot for meeting our emergency service needs today, and then with our future expansion over there. So that station, we can actually expand it, but it's ultimately designed to have a 4-person engine or truck company out of it and a medic unit, which will cover us for probably hopefully 10 to 15 years on it. So, and then as we see that additional industrial growth come in, because it's really what's going to drive additional staffing there will be industrial growth. And with some of the industrial growth that if we saw a $1 billion increase in revenue and tax assessed values, we would be that station would have been staffed with a 4-person engine company and a medic unit. The way our contract is written, that value would have brought it in. So that's where we're at today. We were established in 1850 in this area, and the line donation Southern Pacific was here in the 1870s. There was a post office here in 1873, but we will never see one again. But I will let people know, if you're not aware, we did receive here a year ago, we did get Millersburg added to the 97321. So you can actually use Millersburg as your stated address. It's still within the Albany zip code, but it is recognized by the post office now. So your address can, if you're still using Albany, you still get mail, but you can put actually, when you're filling out paperwork and stuff, you can use Millersburg and it will be recognized as 97321.
Is there a process of adding another zip code for Millersburg within the Albany
It's
post office?
unlikely at this point. I mean, it could be if we get large enough, we could see our own zip code. We'll never get our own post office. So.
Right, but that would help
But
with
it
a
could-
lot of
it could happen.
identifying
Yeah.
how many people
Yeah.
are
I mean, they
utilizing
talk
the
about that,
services.
Yeah, sure.
And that's been a problem for as long as.
I could see that occurring as Albany and the Millersburg area combined grow, that maybe they take either take 97321 and give us our own, maybe 9723 or something, who knows, but I think it's a possibility. It's probably a ways out though.
I know the downfall is we can't use that zip code in a lot of instances because computer systems don't take it.
Take which one?
Millersburg.
Yeah. They
Oh,
should.
really? They should.
They should. It's
Oh,
recognized.
yes,
97321 for most companies lines up to Albany.
Yeah.
Oh, I see what you're saying. And if you put Millersburg,
It doesn't recognize it.
Yeah,
okay. So they're just going off the zip and.
I mean,
It is.
paperwork, you're fine.
It is listed now though, so over time that should change. I think you'll see more and more of them start to recognize it because it is listed in there as and that's pretty common back east. You'll see. I mean, there may be 3 or 4 towns that have the same zone. All right, next slide. 1940s and 60s is where industrial development first began. Of course, we were not a city then; it was in the county. Boise Cascade is the current location of Camco. Simpson Timber, they actually closed in 1989. That's where Talking Waters and Simpson Park is now. Even though it shows on our maps as an industrial zone land, Simpson has a conservation easement over that property, so it can never be used for that. So that's where we lost our first 262 acres. Then the closure of the paper mill in 2019, and with the purchase of the mill site proper by the county, and the break in the permit for their wastewater, discharge permits, there's not a chance of that property ever being used again for that activity. It's trying to ever get that restored. There could have been a possibility had a company come in and purchase that land and purchase the permit from IP and transferred it. But after that happened, it didn't. So that property is also that 298 acres that's still owned by IP over there, is also looking at going underneath the conservation easement. We couldn't do anything out there now, maybe at the time that it first came in the 80s, before we saw a lot of regulations change with the floodway development stuff. You may have been able to, but it's difficult to get access in there and things. So just a lot of things there. ATI Wachang, Giraffe Lake, Georgia Pacific, they all came in prior to the city being incorporated.
Camco's the actual Warner now, isn't it?
Yeah, I should have changed it. Yeah. Yes, I just realized it. So, early 70s, all new considered annexation of industrial properties now part of Millersburg. In fact, it's really interesting if you were to look at Albany's comp plan from the 70s, the property that we were looking at bringing into our UGB was actually shown as industrial in their comp plan future annexation. And it actually went even further west than what we were looking at, almost to the river on the south side of Concert Road. A public hearing took place and the city was incorporated in 1974 by a vote of 76 to 74. Mayor Woods, whose plaque we have out front, was actually voted against it. But he actually ended up becoming on the planning commission, and then became mayor and was mayor. We had one mayor. I think, Scott, you're actually the third mayor now of Millersburg. So in almost fourth. Technically fourth.
Yeah, because
so in 50
short time frame, there was one.
And something that we need to start thinking about, and probably need to start having discussions with councils. Next year will be our 50th anniversary. So we probably should be thinking about that. So probably something we want to talk about, not this budget, but in the next budget year. We're doing that because I believe that was in July when we actually were incorporated. 2000 voters adopted a tax base allowing the city to levy up to $3.50. Up until 2007, the city hadn't levied any taxes. 2007, they started levying $1.70 to pay for the city's portion of a major upgrade to the wastewater plant. So rather than going out for bonds, they did that. They were looking in discussions with former Mayor Clayton Woods. Actually, in 2011, that was coming off. It was a 4-year period that they had to pay that. They were looking at discontinuing, going back to no tax here in the city. But with the closure of the paper mill, the significant loss in tax revenue and franchise fees, they went ahead and maintained that $1.70, but converted it to general fund operations. So if you were to actually go down and ask the county, when did the city start levying taxes as a city? They will tell you 2011, because that's when it was for general fund obligations. The $1.70 that was being levied was for a sewer project. It wasn't for general operations. So they actually, when we were just talking the other day, actually mentioned that we first started levying in 2011 city taxes. And that's accurate because it was. The other was committed specifically to the sewer utility fund, even though it was within our level.
Be interesting to find out when some of the first sewer lines were put in.
You'll see that in a minute.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because they're out in the fields where nothing is happening. Yeah.
So I'm assuming at some point the 2007 levy will drop off.
It's gone. It was finished. It was finished in 2011.
Okay.
It was retired. So we have we have bonded indebtedness, but nothing that's out, but we don't have bonds where, like a lot of cities will have bonds that are on there. We have no, everything's covered within the enterprise. So we have enterprise funds that are repaying debt. But nothing that's outside of, and no additional taxes within the city. Okay, next. Just given some of the timelines of where we've seen things that have occurred. So sewer service, Scott, this is to answer your question. 1979, the city started putting in their first sewer lines. And I think that was one of the main trunks. So for the industry and the lift station at ATI.
So I actually look at those drawings pretty regularly because we have all the record drawings. So that one was from the treatment plant up to the, up to Concert. I think it came all the way up there, included the ATI lift station originally. And then it just, it seemed like about every year or two, they were expanding the system at that time. It was a water and sewer, multiple projects, one after another.
And what's really interesting when you look at that, they were able to, a lot of the projects at the time, because of the value that the city was getting from the taxes, even though they weren't levying taxes, they were doing this all off of franchise fees that they were receiving. They were receiving, almost $1.5 million some years in franchise fees, back in this time period. So they were able to levy a lot of state and federal grants and pay that match with those on it. So a lot of infrastructure went in before they ever started levying taxes or without even having to incur debt.
And was it 18 that the 350 started? Is that, you went by that screen pretty quick?
The 350, yes, was started when we took over. So we actually started levying $2.15 when the city withdrew from Albany Rural and Jefferson Rural. So what happened, so Scott was on, so actually the city had looked at, city used to be split for fire protection. Everything pretty much south of Concert was protected by Albany under a contract with Albany Rural. Everything north of Concert in this area was covered by Jefferson Rural. A number of things have taken place over the years looking at coming in and who is going to serve that. And actually, if you go back to the 40s, this whole area up to the San Diego River was protected by Albany Rural. Jefferson, they split some of it off to Jefferson and some others I think in the 40s, if I remember correctly. So anyway, a lot of discussion. I probably talked with Millersburg's council when I was fire chief at Albany, assistant chief and fire chief in the mid-90s, I think is when the conversations first started. Again, early 2000s, and then just before I left Albany in 2007, when a large factory was looking at coming in called Peak Sun. They were looking at $1 billion investment. They were going to do polysilicon for use in solar panels, but they had some really nasty chemicals. Not so much it would impact the public per se outside, but they had a lot of chemicals. Silane was one of them. So as soon as it's exposed to air, it auto ignites. So they were very concerned with having a rural staff department, volunteer department protecting them. They made a requirement that if they were going to come in, that the property had to be protected by Albany Fire Department. So that was actually withdrawn. This corner, this property over here was withdrawn from Jefferson, came into Albany. At the time, council was looking at going in and just taking everything and just withdrawing everything and coming into Albany Rural. Jefferson told them, if you do that, we're going to fight you on it. They didn't want to risk losing that industry, so they stopped. I ended up going to California as chief, and Scott picked up the ball here. And
10 years later.
10 years later.
Took 10 years to get
10 years later, I get back, I get a call from Scott, and he says, hey, I've got this project. And they're looking at it, they're telling us there's nothing we can do. To take a look at it for me, tell me what you think. So I took a look at it and told them I respectfully disagree with them, and here's how you can do it. So they did a number of public hearings out here that citizens said they want to do it, and we elected to withdraw from both Albany Rural and Jefferson Rural. At the time, Jefferson Rural was looking at a bond measure that would have taken their tax rate to $2.15 per thousand, the same as Albany Rural's for, I think it was a 20-year bond.
20 to 30, yeah.
20 or 30-year bond. And so, but you still would have had a volunteer protection. So it didn't really make sense for the citizens here. So we were able, by just raising the tax rate, Mike, to $3.50, we were able to take off that $2.15 for the rural districts and for our residents and industry south of Concert, and the potential $2.15 that was. I think at the time Jefferson was about $1.45. So had we not done that, I mean, our residents could be paying a potential tax instead of just $3.50. You could be paying a potential tax of $3.50 plus $2.15. So you could be up as high as $5.65. What we did is we said that now cannot happen. You were getting fire protection within your city tax rate of $3.50. And you won't find, like I said, you'll never find a city that does that.
And they said it couldn't be done.
Yeah.
And they said it couldn't be done.
So we were able to
You know
demonstrate,
that? Like,
we
yeah, we can.
demonstrate how you can do it.
Kevin, what happens to the Jefferson station out here?
That is still owned by Jefferson. They still operate out of it. Their intent, I think, is at some point to move it up to the DeRoconner area. But, they're dealing with, when they lost the ambulance, they're still dealing with some rots. They're also having a hard time. Everyone is having a hard time, even volunteers, it's really hard to find volunteers. And I think last I heard, they were like maybe, it's
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to find paid people.
Yeah, it's hard to get paid staff now too.
Yeah.
So-
And that was a big concern, when moving forward with the emergency services was what today, you can't just look at today, but what's going to happen 20, 30 years from now and the struggles. And we're not even seeing that. And it's true. We know it's hard to find paid people, let alone volunteers that have to be qualified at the level of paid. So it's an unfortunate dying breed of people.
So that was a little longer explanation, Mike, but on how we got to the 350.
People already think we get paid too much, so I don't know.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
It was a net minor increase, but it was prevent a net bigger
Yes,
increase
the
that
long-term.
would have happened, and Jefferson was about to pass a bond,
Yeah.
and Millersburg wouldn't have had any way to stop that.
That was the other thing.
Outside of maybe some of the smaller cities in the Portland metro area that are within Tualatin Valley's district, you will not find a city our size that has a career staffed fire engine staffing.
And that was the other concern I had and shared with council is if it did go to a bond, our votes, Millersburg votes, would be competing with Jefferson votes. It would be competing with the whole district. And, so that they would see the value because we have the value here in the industry. And that was part of the deal was that they'd vote something in, but we'd be stuck with a 20, 30-year bond without the services. So it just seemed like it was the right time and the right council and the right person to help with that. Anyways, yeah.
Okay, any other questions on this slide? Okay, let's go to the next. So what draws people to Millersburg? I think it's our large lot sizes, our easy access to I-5 in the rural field. And I should say, we probably should put in there what draws industry. Our central location for industry, our rail access and our access to major highways. We can draw our water sewer. Our water sewers, these systems are designed for supporting industry. The other big thing is we're unique in the fact that industry can draw within a 20-mile radius. They have not only the Albany, Millersburg, MSA area, we have the Corvallis, Salem, MSA, and 40 miles away, we have the Eugene, Springfield MSA. So they have a large area to draw employees from. And that is very attractive to a lot of them. The results of recent growth, change in demographics, primarily industry and farming to increase residential. We have a lot of people that come in here that are new residents. They come in, they don't realize all this industrial is part of Millersburg. They think it's part of Albany. They don't even realize. I think Millersburg stops at Concert Road. I've actually had people tell me, I thought we stopped at Concert Road. Changing priorities. We're seeing a slowing in population growth right now. Increased need for city services and an increased need or desire for regulation. We see a lot more of we see a lot of residents coming in, and we have a paid fire department, but they expect us to have the same services that you would see in a city the size of Albany. Where's our recreation department? Where's our library? Things. And we have to explain to them, you have a tax rate of $3.50. We're reimbursing for those things, but we do have residents that want to see those things. And what I tell them, as we see with what we know we could have potentially here from assessed value with our industry, we could offer those services potentially. Because, when you look at what we're offering right now, $674 million, you double or triple that, which we very easily could do with industry, we can do a lot more things. We could also help the YMCA locate here. We see a lot of requests for commercial. And what we're hearing from people with commercial is with our closeness to Albany, we'll never see a grocery store, a large grocery store out here. We may see a specialized grocery store, but we're not going to see a grocery store with our current population. Even trying to get restaurants and stuff here without a concentrated more, as we see more of this portion come in and we see industrial jobs here that can help support them during the day, we may see that. And we do have plans for our property to go to commercial that we have across the street here surrounding by the fire station. But until we have an employment pool here during the day that's closer to this area, it's really going to be difficult because there's just not that need during the day because a lot of people are leaving the area, due to working south or things. So we don't see a lot of people driving up from ATI and stuff up here for restaurants. I think as we start to see some of the development on our property, we'll see more of that and interest in that. And that's what we've heard is when you start seeing more of the jobs concentrated in this area, that makes more sense and you'll see more people interested in coming in here. But our goal is to do something like maybe a mini Bridgeport Village type design where we'd have some nice get a couple restaurants and have some professional shops, have maybe postal services, some postal service companies, hair salons, urgent care center, attorneys, CPAs, maybe some insurance agents, things like that. Those type of things that people need on a daily basis and that could come out here. So,
Can I
all right.
Something on the desire for regulation piece. Most people wouldn't say they have a desire for more regulation, but it does impact our staffing and our budget then, by extension, because as people have moved in and the demographics have changed, from what was a lot of people who have a farming background or larger lots that want to be left alone. They don't want the city to tell them what to do on their property, to more, even 10,000 square foot lots is more dense. We get a lot of code complaints and deal with code enforcement issues. Matt spends a chunk of his time dealing with that. Even though people don't think they want regulation, it does impact staff time and budgets. Just the desire for those things to, people don't want to necessarily go work it out with their neighbor. They want us to send them a code enforcement letter, and we're complaint driven that way. So the example I like to give is in 2015, 16, a grading permit was proposed. Like, should we have a grading permit? The requirement for somebody to get a permit to do a certain amount of earthwork on their property to make sure it doesn't impact their neighbors. Well, council at the time was like, no, people don't want that. We don't, about 2 years later, there've been so many drainage issues and so many complaints of people. My neighbor did this, and that council, we need a grading permit. We need inspection. So that's a change the community's seen over the last probably 5 years.
We get a lot of complaints, and it's really interesting. Things I think that could be handled. The neighbors just go talk to the neighbor and get to know their neighbor. But a lot of people don't want to do that. And in fact, we're dealing with one right now that we just had someone say, we're sure we've got someone living in a trailer. Matt goes by there all the time, he's never seen any deal, but all the neighbors are sure that it is. And we've had cases when people say that and we find out that, no, there isn't. But, we're at a point now where we're going to have to send a letter out, and we haven't observed anything, but so it's going to be, neighbors have complained that you have someone living. So, that doesn't help things. It's just a matter of just going over and just maybe talking. But I think, we've seen so much change. I think, a lot of concern, but hopefully we can get people to do that, get out and talk more. All right, city trends, population growth. I think this pretty much speaks for itself. You can see the flattening. That's primarily the only reason we're seeing that flattening in that line right now is because there's not lots available to be sold to develop right now. Otherwise, I think we probably would have still, even with today, what we're hearing, even with the interest rates higher, we probably would have not seen quite the flattening that we've had. Our assessed value growth. So prior to the paper mill closing, you can see we were at over 500 million. And then we had a significant drop to about 370 million. And it took almost 10 years before that really started to come up, a little over 10 years to do it. And now we're finally getting back back up there. With what we could see, Amium, capital investment, they're looking at 250. The project on our property is about 400,000. So we could double our assessed value with that. If Sofidel would have come in, it would have been over a 10-year period, but they could have been up to $1 billion. We do have other interesting companies right now looking here, some with some significant potential investment as well. So this is our assessed value by type. Again, you can see right now, just with some that we have coming in, as we see that, as we see the development of our industrial, you're going to see that swing back again, where you're going to be 70, potentially 80% industrial, and probably 20, 30% residential. And I think we'll see that here fairly within the next three years. Property taxes, this is our total bill. So residents in Millersburg pay a total of $15.88. Of that, I would just point out, Miller City is at $3.50, or 22% of your total tax bill. Lynn County represents $4.20, or 27%. So you actually pay more to Lynn County for taxes than you do to the city of Millersburg. Greater Albany Public Schools is your largest at $7. And then we have Linden Community College and 4-H for our total effective rate there of $15.85. So,
and I was gonna say, I think that's a big one to tell people, because I know I've heard a lot of people complain how much taxes went up last year. It was the schools that.
Yeah. Well,
that
and
final bond stage.
other than bonds, as we tell people,
They need to see the slide.
Yeah.
Because I get that all the time. Like, our taxes are so high. I'm like,
yeah.
Really?
Well, and what I think is important,
Here,
under
on this
Oregon
slide.
law, the maximum your tax can go up, other than voted in, the things that you vote for, that the people vote for, is 3% a year. So if we saw nothing happening, if we didn't have any new construction coming in, if we didn't have any residential, we'd be at a maximum growth of 3%. So I just would point that out. So this is, so if you look at combined property tax rate comparison of cities here in Lynn County, so our rate is $3.50, and the total taxing is $15.88, as I said. So we represent a total of 23%. Albany's at $8.45. Their total tax rate's $20 per thousand, and so they represent 42%. Lebanon, $10.62. People that live in Lebanon, their total tax rate's 21, and so they're paying 50%. Sweet Home is at $10.63, and a total rate for all the taxing districts at $23 or 46. Harrisburg's combined, and I will keep on, so Lebanon, Sweet Home, Harrisburg, Scioto all have city tax plus their fire district rates. The only one that doesn't have, Albany and Millersburg are the only cities who do not have a separate fire tax rate. Tangent only has a fire tax rate, so I'll just mention that. Tangent's $2.57. They do not have a city tax rate currently. And as I mentioned, that's one of the problems, because they also don't have a sewer system that can handle industrial growth, or a water system. So they're really in a tough spot. It's cheap. I mean, their tax rates, and even with that, I mean, they're only $1.50 per thousand less than we are, or $1 if you look at, about 93 cents. But they have no infrastructure for sewer or water. They don't have any ownership of water treatment or sewer treatment plants. So, when you don't have those things, it's kind of difficult to get there. But it's pretty telling when we have people, and I have people tell us all the time that our tax rates are high. Well,
Are those last two slides on our website?
they have been. I'm not sure if they still are.
We'll make sure
We
they
can
get
make
back
sure
up
they
there.
get on there.
Good point.
Yeah, and we can send you out, we'll post in the minutes, right? We'll post the presentation afterward, but we can
Yeah,
send you.
Because this stuff isn't
slides
in
that
the.
you're interested in. No.
It's not in that, but it does when we print the budget. It's in
Yeah.
the budget.
Yeah.
So when the budget gets posted, it's posted on the budget now. All right. Any questions on those? Water and sewer. Do you want to say anything about that? It is
This
what
slide
it
is just to demonstrate, number of water and sewer accounts we currently have, commercial, industrial versus residential, and then the amount we bill. So, for a much smaller number of accounts, we bill a lot more to industrial, and that makes sense because they're the bigger water and sewer users. But just to kind of demonstrate where we stand today.
When you say account, is that a unique entity or could a entity have multiple accounts?
Yes, an entity can have multiple accounts. ATI has 5 or 6 accounts because for water, it's per water meter.
Yeah.
Right, each
just
water meter is an account.
Wondering if
Yep.
that's.
Yeah.
how I determine how many. Yeah.
The majority of businesses are one, but our bigger ones may have, particularly ATI, have multiple.
A lot of it's because how they're spread out, so they may have them come from different locations.
Right.
Okay. Our top 10 assessed values in the city, ATI is our largest. Lake Board is number 2. Pacific Core is number 3. Weyerhaeuser and Palm Harbor. Georgia Pacific, we should change that. It's actually
Oh, yeah,
now
Bakelite.
Love's Travel Stop, Alan Dixie Sullivan, Albany Millersburg Development Corporation. The only reason they're on there is because they are the owner of the intermodal. And that's actually going to be changed to, I think that's actually Ledge now. Because Amedeck has changed to Ledge. So in the intermodal center will now be known as Mid-Valley Intermodal Center, MVIC. So, and I would expect with some of the industries we see coming in that we'll probably see some new top 10s. ATI has made, in fact, we just saw now that's what we're receiving in taxes, so they're real market value. So ATI, for example, last year went out for an enterprise zone for 40 million in new investment. We just approved another enterprise zone request this year. One of the things we're doing as a city now, when we're granting enterprise zones within the city. So enterprise zones is a state program that allows businesses to get up to 5 years, depending on their investment and their value and the number of jobs they're bringing in, tax abatement for that new value for up to a 5-year period. We have asked, as companies coming in that are going for that, we've asked for a clawback of our public safety service. So what we pay for public safety for police and fire primarily, it's $2.61 of our $3.50. That number drops. It's been dropping every year as our assessed values increase. But we asked for a clawback of that. So during that period that they're receiving that, we're still going to get the $2.61. We won't get the full $3.50, but they'll give us that so we can enhance and maintain and enhance our services to our industries as well as our citizens. So we'll once ATI starts making that investment that comes in, we'll still get that additional. So on a $100 million investment, that's roughly $261,000 additional dollars a year for services. Okay. Year-end fund balances, just a quick snapshot. You'll notice the purple. You'll see a significant drop in our general fund. That's primarily because we built up our revenues to build the fire station, as you recall. That was a $6.5 million, but even with that right now, we're sitting at about $3 million in fund balances on that. And then sewer with some stuff and things, but most of them you're seeing increases. Any questions on our year-end fund balances? Okay. Did you want to talk about the?
Yeah, I can talk about this. So this is just a snapshot of revenues over the years. As you can see, let's see, point here. So this is sewer, water, streets, and then general fund. For sewer and water, they've been going up, which is what we expect because we've had rate increases that were previously adopted by council. The reason they drop off for 22-23 is because these are budgeted numbers here, not actuals, because we don't have those actuals at the time we put this together. And we always budget a little lower on our revenues to be conservative. So I fully expect those numbers are on track to be an increase, not a decrease, once we get the actuals at the end of the year. Streets went up because we had a grant in there, funding that came in. We'll continue to spend that over the next year. And then general fund is due to franchise fees and tax revenue and all the stuff that we'll go over. Any questions on this? Not including SDCs, which are restricted, and we've got some slides on those separately. This one too?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. Capital expenditures per fund. Again, just a little graphic. This big gray line here was the fire station mainly. And then in 22-23, we had some we had capital expenses throughout all of our funds. And these are all the projects we've been talking about as projects we've talked about in the past. For example, the sewer, the green over here, those are the composting and dewatering projects that we talked about briefly. They're not in our CIP anymore because they're essentially done. There's a little bit of budget left over for just finishing a couple of things that Albany hasn't billed us for yet. Any questions on this?
What's the big increase in the water?
The water was, I will have to look back at that. We budgeted, these are budgeted numbers for 22-23. We budgeted for that AC water line project to happen in this current fiscal year, and that didn't happen. That's probably the biggest piece there. And I'd have to look at our plan from before.
I believe that also included, we thought, Mike, I believe this was the year that we were going to be paying for our portion of the generator that they did with ARPA funds. So was that in there or not?
No,
Okay,
that wasn't.
okay.
Yeah, we didn't have that. There were several projects at the wastewater plant. They had to replace a valve and some other things that we did. I can get you more of the breakdown if you'd like, but
Does that include the diversion up off of Woods Road or Millersburg Drive?
diversion.
The little valve we put in there?
No, that was a pretty minor cost actually that we were able to handle internally with our staff. So that was a material cost for that valve in the stormwater fund. But it was pretty minor. It was a big cost for one valve, but in the grand scheme of things, it wasn't. Amount of debt service per fund. So this is blue water, green wastewater again. So these are our loans for the treatment plant construction. So read these notes. Water was refinanced in 2018. Wastewater includes 2 loan agreements with the city of Albany for Millersburg's portion of construction costs. And the water loan will be done December 2024. So that one's going to be complete pretty soon. Yep. So we haven't had any new debt service in a while. These are just, they've been slowly getting paid off over time. Franchise fees, this is what we've seen. These are actuals, so they only go up through 21, 22. Republic, Comcast, sorry. Comcast dropped off. It's not entirely clear with some of these utilities exactly what has driven some of the changes, but it's usage. Northwest Natural's going up. CenturyLink's consistently declining because they're not even going in some of the new areas. But the big one that impacts us is power. So our total franchise fees really reflects what power's doing. And it's been going down, but we are on track this year now to start going back up a little bit.
So how do we know that the revenue that they show us is what we're getting paid for?
So we can ask them for things, and most of them give us a breakdown of it. So based on the customers and stuff, you know, the big one that's always a hard one, and it's difficult to understand, but to kind of put things in perspective. So in 2007, if I recall, I think our electrical franchise fees, I think it was 2007. I think they were almost 1.7 million. But when the paper mill shut down, the paper mill had their own substation. They were papers, you know, they're very intensive. So that was a huge loss when they came off. And then the last 3 years, you know, during COVID and stuff, we saw a big drop in franchise fees, electrical franchise fees. ATI just put in another furnace. So they're starting to ramp up. And they're looking at some big ramp ups. In fact, we just had a discussion with Pacific Power. They said we should expect to see significant increases in our franchise fees over the next 5 years, just with what ATI has planned right now. The company that's coming in, that's looking at our property, is a big power user. If they come in, we'll see a significant. I think so the new substation that's going in is 120 megawatt substation. And if I remember the client that we have looking here, they're 40 to 60 megawatts on their own. So pretty significant. AMEM, I think it's going to be around 8 to 11 megawatts. So
So curious on this, do you have numbers to date? I mean, I know it's only for,
Yep.
I'm just kind of curious where
There-
we're at to date.
On which one?
Just
all of
for, yeah, just for franchise fees.
Let's
I
look
mean,
in the,
Just a second, I can tell you.
Yeah.
our projection, that would be the best one to look
Yeah.
at. I
And
can
if you don't have it, maybe we can cover it next time or something. I'm just kind of curious if we're, I mean, if we're already showing an increase, then we know it's gonna be even better with still a couple months to go, and I'm sure they're a couple months behind, so
Well,
at least.
franchise fees are, we get paid electric franchise fees monthly.
Oh, they do pay a monthly?
And we've looked at where we are, where we think we're gonna finish the year, and then we make our projections for next year based on that. But I will tell you, we're always gonna be conservative in the revenues. Yeah.
You can't see it next, we took out the projections, but
Yeah, so year to date right now, we're at 716,000 for electrical franchise fees. And so we've got, that is, whoops, I take that back, I'm sorry, that's last year. So last year we had a total there, so year to date for electrical franchise fees, we're at $620,000. But what we're seeing right now is about 70,000, where we had been around 60,000 in franchise fees, averaging for electric.
so our total franchise fees that we're projecting by the end of the year, and we're pretty close. I mean, they don't vary that much, from what we've been getting month by month. Is it 971?
So franchise fees are based off their revenue?
Gross revenue.
So this total would be up. By the
Well,
end
it'll
of the
start
year.
jumping up this month when we hit 90s this weekend.
Yeah.
More people are turning on ACs.
Yes, that will, I mean, we don't, the majority that we see is from our industry, yeah. Residential is really a pretty small percentage. But we did just have we just had a discussion and asked Pacific Core if they could provide us, kind of give us a breakdown of what are we looking at, who are large, I said, I really don't care if you don't tell us who, but what are we looking at for our largest users? What are we talking about in megawatts? So it kind of helps us know then what do we expect, we know who our largest user is, it's gonna be ATI, but what's their megawatt use a month? And then what you're telling us, what are you expecting? One of the reasons that this substation is here, because they knew that the Murder Creek substation had reached its capacity. So they had to do something, so.
And are they willing to provide that information?
Yeah, he told us he would work on trying to get it. He wasn't sure how much, but he was gonna try to get it, so. And the reason I asked him that is because I went back and looking at the old documents, they actually used to give them what they were projecting for it. So I mentioned that to him. I said,
Well, I'm just wondering if they're afraid we get back into the actual number.
well, I think we can ask for an audit if we felt that they weren't capturing everything. Knowing what's, talking with if I've had a very good relationship. I've known the president at ATI for 20 years. And so I asked him one day, I said, we're seeing significant, I said, are your power uses, he says, yeah, they're down significantly from what they were 5 years ago. So I'm pretty comfortable because I know that they're probably one of the biggest ones that we are. The other one is probably Flakeboard, and I know they've cut production back. They're still operating, but they've cut production back as well. So
I think Ty Squared would be up in there.
Yeah,
too.
that's what I was just thinking.
well, yeah, we're not. I expected to see a big jump when they start, but they only have one furnace, and we haven't seen a huge increase in it. I know they're picking up and they're doing more, but
I may have missed it, but why did Comcast have significant drop?
Poor service.
Comcast, they're not even putting pipe in the ground in some of these.
most of our new subdivisions,
They're
there's
going
not
out.
access. They didn't bother running.
No, CenturyLink did.
CenturyLink.
Comcast is everywhere.
Or CenturyLink.
Yeah.
My bad. I was thinking it was the low one,
This,
which is weird.
this seems odd, I'm not
They
sure why.
have DirecTV and Dish and all those.
Everything that's.
I'm sure for internet.
I would have.
Streaming.
It's a good question, Mike, because during COVID, I expected more people working from home. We would see larger
Well,
uses.
there we go, it spiked here.
Yeah, it did spike, and then people started going back to work. So that might be part of it.
There you go. I thought you were talking about CenturyLink, because Yeah, that's, yeah, no.
Diet breeding.
Keeps raising their rates and get another 5% on top of that. Yeah, and Pacific Core just raised their rates here as well. But if you look, if you look from 19 to 21, we did see a significant jump in Comcast. And then I think as people started going back to work, it probably settled back out a little bit.
So if you take out those and average it, it's,
But then everyone went home and our power usage went down at the industry, so.
Yeah.
It would be interesting to find out on the Comcast, because work shouldn't drive that. I mean, you either have home, well. at
Well, I
least-
know a lot of people who started working from home, they upped their plans while they were working from home, so they'd have more
But
because,
still didn't match what corporate has to pay,
Yeah,
and if they scaled back on
if
that.
they scale
Yeah.
back, that would have, but
well, but I think most of the corporate, I know a lot of the corporate out here are on LS.
yeah, they're not on.
So they're not using Comcast, they're using LS networks, so.
Building permits? Okay, so this is just a trend that we've all been seeing. Development has slowed down. It's not non-existent, but it's slowed down significantly from the spike that we had. And this, the blue is the single family homes, the orange is all building permits. And yeah, it looks like what we expected to see.
So it's very similar to maybe Albany and other cities or an area.
I don't know, I think ours is more related to the fact that there's no place, there's not lots available for them to go on.
Right, other cities are seeing residential building booms, but we're just not in that group because.
I was just curious because I
The
know
land.
we increased SDC fees and there was a concern about, that's going to slow down growth.
It didn't
and I was
slow
just
anything.
Curious if there was a trend to that.
No.
But
Inventory available to build.
yeah,
on as well.
but
Yeah,
if that's what you guys are saying, it makes sense. There isn't a lot out there. So.
From what we hear, SDCs are an issue for one-offs, for the small ones, but the builders who are coming in buying 20 lots, it's just part of their cost. They haven't even mentioned it really. You see this dip here and then came back up. I think during this time, we had 3 subdivisions just finishing up construction of infrastructure, and then all their houses started getting built, in here. So or maybe it was 2 at that time, but
Wasn't one delayed because of
wetlands.
wetlands, yes.
it'll be interesting to see with the new permits, though, how long it takes them to move those lots with not just increased interest rates, but now the increased fees for good credit that started 1 May.
People are bailing out of California, they're gonna come up here and pay cash for these houses. They're not gonna get a loan.
Yeah. Although what they're getting out of cash in their homes down there is decreasing quickly too.
Well, absolutely. I mean, their houses down there, you buy them for 50,000, 10 years later, they're worth.
If that's, yeah.
So-
There's a couple of good breaking points coming in.
So I think we're at a good breaking point, if you're in agreement, and we pick it up and we'll start with our 21-22 adopted versus budget versus actuals and get into the budget review next.
Unless you want a marathon session.
Nope.
This wasn't.
This was just the warm-up.
Actually, our experience has been with the amount of time we went over stuff here. Now, he's okay.
He's a bit ominous looking, but he's a good guy.
I mentioned we're gonna go look at use the light meter maps.
Matt is our primary representative with Jacobs.
Just in time? Any comments from the public online?
Well, we don't have any public online. This whole time we've only had Lori and Dave, and I don't believe they have any comments.
Our audience?
Yeah, it'd be great to see you both in person.
All right, anything from the committee?
I just really appreciate everyone's time tonight and doing that. It's a lot of work, so appreciate it. From my perspective, and
Thank you for stealing my thunder.
Sorry. you
No.
go. I just say that every time when
It is a lot of work.
anytime people volunteer. But yeah. Go ahead.
I know your eyes glaze over, but we do appreciate it. It is very important work. So thank you all for participating. And with
And I
that,
will say, we appreciate the questions as well, so don't be afraid to ask.
We're adjourned.
No, I know, you're good. I just
giving you a hard
wanted to
time.
make sure it gets out there, because we're sort of off.
I'm gonna sit there right now.